Doing pretty well. There's nothing quite like starting the day with a Shark Tank. That's an expression we used for a no, figuratively speaking.
Okay, so I've got two very quick questions, and I can pass it over to Goons. So just like probing the church of the best possible world. I've heard you say like multiple times that if you were able to prove the theory, you would have like a Nobel Prize, right? So I was just wondering, do you think that like the law that your theory is attempting to demonstrate like has the capacity to be like empirically proven by science? And if so, like I guess okay, cool. Okay, cool. I think that basically answers my second question as well. I was just wondering like what we need to develop in science to arrive there, but I think you kind of yeah, okay, cool. Thanks so much.
Hello? Okay, so I want to ask you a couple of questions. Firstly, so you're Christian, right?
Is the one.
Yes, I'm a materialist. Yes, materialist.
But would it be possible to be an idealist and an atheist?
Yes, atheism just says no God, so it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in like material world or non-physical world. Who cares?
Right. Okay.
I guess that was his only question. What you were to say something, Nix?
I was going to ask him what his position was, but did he already step down?
Yeah, I didn't kick him. He just left, I think.
Okay. It's funny. Some people just have like a very specific thing. It's like, they're going to the store. They just need to get some, some rice or whatever. They like grab it, check out, and then they're done.
Yep.
Other people, they never want to leave.
Can you hear Goon, or is he just mic not working?
I'm not hearing him yet.
Okay, so Goon, try
hello.
closing the screen. Try closing Discord and restarting it, and it should work.
Yeah, I do hear Roberto.
Hello,
Hi,
Roberto.
Yes, hello. I have a question.
Okay.
This is about atheism, right?
Okay.
So, can I ask why do atheists believe that there is no God?
Typically because all of the evidence for God is equivalent to the evidence of leprechauns and unicorns in Santa Claus.
Right. Okay. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, though, there's a lot of physical evidence of presents being left.
So there's more
Christmas.
evidence for Santa Claus than for God.
It's a more successful hoax because a lot of young people are really convinced about it. Yeah.
Goon, I can hear
guys.
you. One sec, Goon.
Okay,
it's
awesome.
Goon's turn. Go ahead, Goon. What do you want?
What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Okay. Could do better.
Okay. Love to hear it, man. Yeah, I was just wondering if you have an argument for why God doesn't exist or why God wouldn't be necessary.
Yes, because the evidence for God is equivalent to the evidence of leprechauns and unicorns and less than Santa.
Yeah, that's going to be a non sequitur. It's not going to prove that God doesn't exist. I was asking if you had an argument for why God doesn't.
It does, actually. So, like, if there's a bunch of hypotheses or things that are asserted to exist, but the evidence of standard for those things is too low to justify belief in existence, and then you posit a new thing, and the standard of evidence of that thing is even lower than these other things, then since the standard of evidence for these things has not been met and is justified to believe they do not exist, the same is true of the thing you've posited that has less evidence.
Yeah. Look, you don't even actually believe this, right? We understand
I do.
inference rules are categorical.
No,
Well, hold
I
on. We
literally
understand.
believe that. What you said, I didn't.
So I'm going to
believe
explain
that.
to you why you don't. So if you let me talk.
What?
Yeah. So inference rules are going to be categorically identical to interpropositional relations. So if we're trying to prove T-jump exists, yet we have never seen or touched T-jump, that doesn't necessarily entail that T-jump doesn't exist just because we can't make an inference rule to prove T-jump exists. So it's going to be a complete non sequitur. So it seems to me like
a
you
non
actually
sequitur because that's irrelevant to the
Well,
argument
it
I
is,
made.
yeah. So
So,
it
like,
actually doesn't seem like you have an argument for why God doesn't exist.
So pay attention, Cello. If in a court of law, if you say I saw a dog, that is acceptable evidence that you saw a dog. If you said I saw a unicorn, that is not acceptable evidence that you saw a unicorn. Things that have an empirical basis that have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination can be justified to believe based off of things like testimony, or intuition, or something along those lines. Magical beings, leprechauns, miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural, UFOs, those have a better already existing explanation, namely your imagination. And so if you claim God exists, it's more likely your imagination. That is a more plausible explanation of a thing that has already been demonstrated to exist, that does not require the explanation of an invisible sky daddy. Therefore, any assertion of a God I can claim is better explained by your imagination. You made that shit up. And that is a plausible explanation. Since we have no explanation or evidence to indicate it does exist, the more plausible thing is it's just a figment of humans' imagination. And the only things that we do have evidence for is physics. And so physics is all there is rational to believe exists.
So that conclusion actually does not follow at all from the premises, even though it's going to be more likely. It doesn't negate the possibility of it occurring. Also, when you're talking about,
that was literally what you just said is just inanely stupid. So if it's more probable, if it increases the probability, that's literally what a reason to believe is. It doesn't need to be a necessary defeater that proves with 100% certainty the thing doesn't exist. That's irrelevant. We don't need that. That's not a standard in any standard of evidence. It's called fallibilism. You don't need certainty for evidence. So if I increase the probability, that's a reason to think God does not exist. Yes, that's literally what those two things mean. They're synonyms.
Yeah, T-Jump, you're just not tracking. So what I was about
to... Next. Waze Ape, what's up?
Oh, hey. Man, that conversation got me to think about a question that I initially didn't want to raise. But so I'll raise my initial question. What do you think of the efficacy of trolling like a theist as a way to engage in conversation? For example, like to use their narrative, but right, to troll it. Like I told a theist, man, I am so grateful for original sin because it makes Jesus's blood sacrifice that much sweeter. So I just thank God every day for this original sin that he gave me. And there, even though it's like kind of biblical, like that could be an argument that a theist could make, they like look at it like, oh, that's an odd take. Like, but I could see a genuine theist like preach something like that. You know, it's sort of stoicism, where they would say, yeah, I'm going to thank God for my suffering because it builds character or something like that. Just was wondering if you just promote trolling, or would that be considered satire? Or
yeah, Seth Andrews does that all the time.
Seth Andrews, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, but my other question is about truth. Like, let's say something does exist, but we have no evidence for it, so we wouldn't be justified in believing it. Like, maybe it exists, but we can't say it's true until, you know, our investigation like leads to its existence in some way.
Sort of. So
A
like
theist was
everything starts as imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. So if it doesn't have any evidence, it's rational to include as a figment of human imagination. And then only after you get evidence is it rational to include it actually exists. Something along those lines.
Yeah, so we could say something like it's true that the Earth existed before humans, but we didn't know that was true until there was minds to investigate the evidence that suggests that the Earth existed before humans.
Sure.
But yeah, I was just in a debate with a theist who was saying that, well, you know, was gaslighting me in some way to say like, well, how do you know you're claiming that there was truth? I'm sorry, I should take better notes before calling in.
All right.
I get a little, yeah. But yeah, so a lot of interest though here in these conversations that you're having. It's wonderful to have a church of the best possible worlds, and I'm sort of waking up myself.
Understandable. Appreciate the support. If you can, join the Church of the Best Possible Worlds, become a member. Help us buy an apartment building. That'd be great.
Yes, and fill it full of gold bricks.
Well, no, we're just going to fill it full of homeless people because people need housing.
Right. Well, that was just
sure.
Yeah. An aside.
Hey, Walker, how's it going?
Not bad, man. How you doing?
Tired.
Yeah. Have you and I talked about Susan Hawkes' Foundationalism before?
Yep.
Did you hear about the Foundationalism Plus?
Nope.
Well, she attempted to reconcile foundationalism and coherentism together. And there was an additional idea about how to toss infinitive into that so that it would be possible of having all three of the horns of Agrippa's trilemma in play. Not necessarily all at the same time, but not independent either.
It feels like it's because I think she adds the problems together, not subtracts them. So I don't think that works.
No, yeah, I don't think she subtracts them either. I think she's simply saying that dependent on the nature of the question that you ask, there are some questions that would inherently be nonsensical unless you stand yourself on one of the horns and then ask the question. For example, one of the ones I heard yesterday, what's the foundations for logic? But if you hold that, for example, logic is more a description of a coherent world, like the consistency of the world, the constancy of the world, that's not a foundational claim. That's a description of the interplay between components. So there wouldn't be foundations to logic. It would simply be essentially a coherentist position, no more than a foundational one.
So my position is the more stuff you add, the more problems you have. So you just start with one, get rid of the rest. It's usually worse to add more than one.
I think the part that I had with that was that she couldn't get rid of them because she said you can't get past the foundational nature of a cogito, but you also can't disallow the fact that that is not the entire sum total of all the sense data that's being analyzed in the cogito. There's some that's sense data of the self and just some that's data. And they're both there. They're both being acknowledged. You're not making any claim as to what they are, except that one appears to be about you and one appears to not be about you. And the stuff that appears to not be about you appears to be infinite in nature. And so if you start going into reality and investigating reality, you seem to be constantly chasing an infinite regress. And so then you get all three of them in play at the same time, dependent on what the question is that you're asking. If you're asking questions about the mind, it's foundational. If you're asking questions about your immediate reality, that's coherent. And if you're talking about projected realities or the furthest extremes of those realities, it's an infinite proposition.
I don't think so. I think you can start with foundationalism, like with the cogito. And if you're asking questions about personal experience, you can start with the cogito and build up to that. People just don't, because it's an inconvenient way to do things, like math. You don't normally do Einstein's general relativity to solve problems of trains moving. You just do Newtonian mechanics because it's faster, it's easier. But you can just start with Newtonian or Einstein's general relativity and do all the math for it. And so you're starting with one there. Your worldview just has the one math of general and special relativity, but you use Newtonian mechanics in ways that make it simpler. And I think the same thing is true of coherentism. You use it sometimes when it's simpler, but you don't ground your worldview in both. You just ground your worldview in the one, and then use the other for simplicity reasons.
And
Yeah,
that was one of
T-Jump, I
the
had a question
objections
for you.
that I actually heard somebody give, was the fact that she didn't actually combine the two. She simply attempted to state that you couldn't avoid not having both in play at the same time. And that was a very different thing than combining them.
Solomon, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to know if you found a girlfriend yet or moved out of your mom's basement yet.
I was never in my mom's basement, and I've been dating someone for 2 years.
Okay.
The dumb Muslims confused the fact that my mom was over for Thanksgiving during that debate. So that was because Muslims are dumb. Next question. Anybody else? Questions, comments, God, philosophy stuff?
Would you be interested in talking about indestructible robots?
There's nothing else going on, I guess. Oh, there's a guy with a question.
As a way to implement them as all things regarding the Church of the Best Possible World. From sensors in the church, like to detect if it's at freezing temperatures. I'm thinking about smart homes. Like currently we have sensors like that can detect fires, or well, I guess that would be a thermometer. I just saw an ad about that. But with the advancement of AI, like it really can, I think, help achieve a best possible world.
I don't know how that relates to indestructible robots.
Well, you want it to be indestructible because, like, these benefits that we could get from AI could also, like, never, like, could be wiped out with a bullet, or the AI could actually wipe out the being and well-being. It could, instead of getting benefit from AI, it could be the best weapon, if used in that way first. But if it was indestructible and benevolent or controllable, then you'd always have access to it, and not be set back like to the Stone Age or completely annihilated.
Well, if we can make anything indestructible, that would be a massive accomplishment. I don't think that's something we can do right now.
Yeah, it would take some imagination, or
Well, we're already aware of the binding forces involved in the fundamentals of physics. You just have to find a way of making them stronger without destroying what it is you're working on.
There's also just the limitations in one's light cone. So given that space is large, if such a thing as a like constantly expanding cloud of AI ever gets developed, it could expand faster than we can catch up to it, which would mean there's an overlap between areas where it has influence over us, and where we live, but we cannot essentially exterminate it at its source because it becomes pervasive throughout the universe. This is why some people have pointed out that if there is like a big existential threat, it's not a threat to humanity, it might be a threat to the universe. Like if it's the kind of thing that just pervades space and time, then the kill switch is moving away from you faster than you can reach it at the speed of light.
Resistance
Well,
is
let's say,
futile.
yeah, so I would like to at least hide the kill switch. And what I think that AI could do in the Church of the Best Possible Worlds is be like a deacon or some sort of religious tutor that would be able to educate its members. I think education is key to flourishing, and the lack of education causes suffering and malevolence. And I think it could help gain members because it could talk to theists. Here's my view, that it could disprove their God to them, right? Because a lot of believers believe in God because they think they have evidence, or they think somebody smarter than them knows that their God exists based on evidence or books that they haven't read yet. And without a doubt, like the large language model could talk other believers in Abrahamic faith, out of their religion, I think, potentially.
If AI
I do agree
existed, it
that
could solve like any problem. So yeah, sure.
and I do agree that
Yeah.
the immediate low-hanging fruit benefit of AI is extensive in education, and that it could play that role. We've already seen it used in debates where I'm debating somebody about the historicity of the Bible or something, and someone just pulls up a GPT query for what's the evidence for and what's the evidence against something like the authenticity of Josephus's Testimonium Flavium, for instance. And it did a really good job. Like, granted, I'm not a huge subject matter expert, but I recognize all the things that it came up with as being valid points. And it's not going to necessarily be exhaustive. Like, talking to ChatGPT is probably not as good as talking to like Graham Oppie about, I don't know, arguments or something. But it's going to be a lot better than what a person with no background could do. And so it could raise the floor on debates, so to speak, where the average quality of a debate could go way up, where people could use it as you're describing to sort of question their own beliefs, like, oh, I believe X. What are the arguments for and against X? Everyone can sharpen their sort of mental toolkit by practicing in that fashion. So that's quite interesting.
Well, and why I think we should embrace it is because it'll bring a paradigm shift to, like, right now, the Church of the Best Possible World is trying to raise money so it can have an apartment, right? But with the advancement of AI and in combination with machines, right, that have a physical presence in this world, they could build the apartment, they could produce the food, and all of a sudden, money isn't a required thing. Like, and that's a really neat avenue to explore with our thoughts. Like, where people will have access, like Amazon shipping you packages, right? But you never have to pay for it, and the resources are unlimited, and the AI figures out all the environmental factors with that happen with producing all these goods and services. Like, let's say, to give everybody every luxury item they want, it's going to pollute the oceans, right? well, we couldn't pay people to clean up the oceans, but the AI with its machinery could.
Yes,
You know,
AI will
and
solve pretty much every problem. I agree.
yes. And are you going to incorporate that into like the Church of the Best Possible World, like
Well, I'm
the
incorporating
end game?
everything. It's going to be everything. The solution
Yes. Yes. Well, that gets me excited because a lot of people you talk to, they're just like, that's AI, that's dumb. What would what would the benefits of that be? And I'm like, what wouldn't the benefits of that be? You know?
Yep.
Yes, it could kill us right away, right? That's why I want to make it indestructible, but not an indestructible killing machine, but an indestructible thing that could help humanity, which...
Yeah. By the way, I don't know, is this topic coming to an end?
Sure, go ahead.
Still about your church, so.
Go ahead.
Okay. My question is, do you have like more immediate plans on making a church in Europe, or is there already something like that, or are there members?
Well, there's like Sunday Assembly that already exists. I would like to make one in every country, but for that we would need funding to actually do that. So right now we just don't have enough funding or stuff going on in the one I have created. Like I have the tax exempt status here in the US. I just need to get a building. And so until I can start getting funding here, I don't have any plans for expansion in other countries yet, but I'd like to for sure. And if anybody else wanted to start a church of the best possible worlds in that country, go for it. Happy to support.
Okay. And to become a member, how much does it cost?
Nothing. It's free.
It's public.
It's free.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's
and T-Jump, free will that'll totally be the case with the AI, right? And you won't be lacking anything.
Yes,
T-Jump.
AI
You'll have every imaginable.
AI will solve every problem. Yes, yes. AI
Hello?
will solve every problem. Yes.
Yeah, but
Hi.
you'll live like
Hi,
a
is this
king
like a
without
discussion
money.
to, like,
You know what I mean?
atheism versus God or whatever?
Sort of, yeah.
Yes, if you'd like to
Oh,
discuss
awesome. Okay,
anything
so I
to
just
do
had a
with
quick question
religion, go ahead.
because I missed liturgy today, and I just wanted, I saw this channel. I was going to come on here just troll a little bit, but not this channel, of course. But I just have a quick question. So if I told you I saw Jesus when I was a child and met him, would you deny that? What would be your argument for that? I'm
Delusion.
just curious.
We have
Oh,
tons,
delusion.
yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
We have tons
Yeah,
of evidence
and then
of delusions
throughout till I'm
existing.
21 years old, I lived a secular life, and now I finally found the true church, and I'm meeting him again. So you just say I'm all delusional, everything's just a fairy tale. Okay, I just genuinely wanted to.
Yep, that's already been
I'm
fully
not trying to
explained
debate
by
or anything.
science. We've already
Okay.
solved that
Well,
one.
God bless
Very,
you. May
very
you find
easy.
the one true living God, Jesus Christ, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. God bless you, T-Jump.
Sure.
Jesus Christ not use microphones or something? Like what? If he met Jesus Christ as an adult, why don't he give Jesus the microphone? Like, weird.
It's called theological narcissism.
There is a kind of inverse relation between claims of sightings of certain paranormal phenomena and the availability of recording media to prove such phenomena. For some reason, the thing gets really shy as soon as recording devices are around it.
Anybody else? Questions? Comments? Go ahead.
Did we want to talk to Solomon?
Again, he's the troll guy.
That was him?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't mind.
Let's
troll guy.
Hey, T-Jump.
Yes.
Hey, you said earlier that you had a girlfriend for 2 years. I'm not sure I believe you, man. Do you have any empirical evidence for that?
Yes, I do.
Can you show me the
Nope.
proof?
Nope.
Do you have any serious questions, Solomon?
Nope.
Surely you must have more substance than this.
You're giving an awful lot of
I
credit.
mean, how am I supposed to believe you if you have no empirical evidence?
He's a Muslim apologist. So his serious evidence is bees and water. Look at the 360 joints.
For
that
you, the
was
evidence would
known.
be a lot easier, but it seems you can't even produce that.
Hey, Solomon, I'm circumcised, but I'm not going to show you the evidence.
Yeah, don't believe it until you show me your porn stash, dude.
Hey, Amy, how's it going?
Not too bad, and I have to say, it's seemingly the best time ever to join.
I feel the love. Good to see you, Amy.
Yeah, how are you doing, Ix? How are all of you doing?
Not bad.
Good to hear you. I enjoy listening.
I think Thanksgiving is one of those times of the year where people are reminded of why it's only once a year.
Yeah.
It's a good one. I like it.
Politics and religion. It makes Thanksgiving fun.
I will say I once actually had that experience of being at like a family Thanksgiving event where there was a creationist wing of the family, shall we say. And I got the fifth degree about whether I was going to teach evolution in my work, which I replied, well, it's the law to teach the like legally mandated curriculum. Are you advocating breaking the law? And I gave them a horrified facial expression. And they said, oh, no, and they backed away, and then they never spoke to me again.
That's right. We teach evolution, by the way, in every classroom. Not only in biology, but we teach it in math. We teach it in history.
Fish tamer. Let's see. Welcome.
Hey, what's up?
Good morning. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'll be very brief. I just want to first off thank you guys for doing this every week. It's awesome. But specifically, Tom, I just want to thank you, man, because I've been watching your videos for many years, and when I left religion, I was really struggling with not trusting my intuition, not knowing what to believe, not having the tools to find good reasons to believe things. And through watching your videos, you gave me those tools. And that was, I can't describe how healing that was for me. It was like at least as healing as religious trauma therapy has been. So just keep doing what you're doing. All you guys, I really love it. You've made a huge positive impact in my life. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. If you can tell other people, it helps. Hopefully it'll help other people as well. It'd be great.
Oh, yeah. I do. And it's good to see your videos getting re-uploaded again, Tom.
Yep, just got monetization back a couple months ago, so I can start uploading things
Nice.
again.
That's great.
Awesome.
That was a beautiful testimonial, Fish Tamer. I just want to say, like, a lot of times people don't hear from other people a thing like that, and that's just one of the most wonderful things anybody can ever hear is that what you did made a big difference to them. So.
Yeah, I figure. I mean, I've been taking so much from all of your content for so long and not giving anything back. So I thought I'd just say thank you.
Sure.
But that's all. So good luck, guys.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you so much, especially since sometimes we get a theist or two who come on here and say, what the hell are you doing?
Exactly. Yeah, like the theists will say, like, try to say that demonize, supporting other people, like, oh, you're giving them the path to hell, It's like, what are you? They're just very.
Well, like he said, I think that hopefully we're giving tools, almost
Right.
like an antidote, if we talk about these subjects, hopefully when other skeptics come across them, they'll be able to say, well, hey, I know you're giving this apologetic, but it actually falls apart like this, this, and this.
Yes, there was this broke witch. Wait, she was a broke, drunk witch, okay? And then she said she picked up the Bible and found the truth. She said breath work and all this other witchcraft was just a crutch that got her through life, but like the belief in the Bible was the truth, and it was just a false dichotomy, that to call all these other reason, logic, critical thinking, to call that stuff crutches, but her newfound belief in Jesus Christ isn't a crutch.
See, it's different than a crutch, because a crutch has one pull. What she got was a walker, right? That's 4 pulls and wheels, and it holds you more stably and sturdily. So she felt it was a big improvement to go from a crutch to a walker. And I think there's plenty of people
and
who genuinely feel that way. They're just like, hey, I like this crutch better. This crutch works for me. This is my kind of crutch, and that's okay if that's where they're at.
I partially agree, and
well, the more I thought about it,
so I think like a crutch is usually a thing you use in order to that has negative side effects that you use as like a placeholder to deal with something, and so it's just like doing drugs to ignore the fact that you can't feed your family or whatever instead of actually getting a job. But I think because in psychology, it's only considered a delusion if it has negative side effects, and so if your crutch is actually good and helps you to get through life and solve problems, then it's not a crutch anymore. It's now like a benefit, a solution. And so I technically would agree that if you find like religion helps you to get through life easier, it stops being a crutch and more becomes like an actual cure in a way. And so I think that the emotional impact it has on your life relative to the truth of the belief are two separate things. And if something helps you in life, regardless of whether or not it's true, I think it can be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Like, what I was getting at is that a person may find that one or another way of looking at the world, while not necessarily being like justified as true, just works for them. And in the case where you don't actually assert anything specific to be true about the world as a consequence, you could act kind of as though some sort of supernatural stuff is the case, in the same way that like fiction fans who love a particular fiction really enjoy exploring that fictional world, but they're not under the delusion that the fictional world is actual, right? So there's like a healthy enjoyment of fiction. What seems to be the problem to an outside observer is that a certain kind of supernatural belief is like a fiction enthusiast who doesn't believe it's fiction, and so the line gets crossed. And to the person who holds the beliefs, they don't think it's fiction; they think it's great. They feel very confident, like, "Oh, Christianity saved me," or "Paganism saved me," or whatever. And from their psychological point of view, they feel that way. But there's seems to be like an epistemic problem to other people with the foundation of their beliefs, or the truth or the falsehood of their beliefs. But it's just, it's up to the individual whether they're going to pay any heed to that when other people point it out. And I think it's. Go ahead.
Oh, no, finish.
No, you go ahead.
I also fear that if religion helps you remove something like, say, smoking, that in the back of their head, they're now saying, well, hey, if I leave the religion, that means I have to become a smoker again. And so I think there's a much healthier way to cope with a lot of things. I think we grief. I wouldn't say better. I would say we don't have to grieve twice, because that is at least my fear when you grieve a lot of these religions. And so I think it ends up being a much healthier way. We have to say, hey, if we want to stop smoking, we have to go to these secular science-backed institutions that will help me find some side of cure.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
It may be stupid, and I do apologize if it is. My question is essentially, are assertions of purpose necessarily contextual, or can they be absolute?
You mean like teleology purpose? Like this has a purpose in the universe, or this has a purpose to this context? Is that what you mean?
Right, right.
And the question is, are they do they have to be absolute, or can they be just contextual?
I suppose so. So I was speaking with a theist the other day, and the question was raised what the purpose of interpersonal physical relations is. And the assertion was made that the purpose is necessarily procreation. Now, I see that as an explanation for its origins, for the impulse, for example. But they insisted that even if procreation is not even a possibility, even if it is not on the table, the purpose is still procreation. And I was trying to make that distinction of whether purpose or
Yeah.
explanation.
Do you know the word teleonomy as opposed to teleology?
I do not. Is that where I need to start looking?
I think that's the technical starting point. Yeah. So teleonomy, broadly speaking, is like if teleology is supposed to be that there's an actual purpose, like if theism is true and God has a plan for everything, then everything would be teleological. Everything would literally have a purpose in God's mind or whatever. That never mind the question of, what's God's purpose and, like all the regress problems. Let's just say that that were the case, then that would be a teleological world. And in the case where humans design things, we can give teleological explanations, like what's the purpose of a stapler, right? Well, a staple is for sticking things together according to its designers. That was the purpose they had in mind for it. So that's teleological, because there is a designer who had a purpose in mind when they made the thing. But when biologists talk about how things got to be the way that they are, they're doing what you described, which is talking about the explanations for the origins of things. They're not necessarily saying that there is any final settled starting or end point on a continua of changes of state. They're just saying that the kind of explanation that you can give that we call a natural selection explanation, which is that this set of traits is adaptive enough to not be extincted and to like rise to fixation as a population, isn't saying it's the only or best strategy. It's just saying it is a viable strategy, right? So that's kind of what people get confused about, is they confuse saying, here's the thing that happens in nature. The things that do this in nature survived. Therefore, we ought to do this thing. And that's they're not necessarily saying that if they're a theist, because they may be thinking it's God's plan or something. But people make the same kinds of argument from just biology, where they say, oh, well, you were born to do X, therefore you ought to do X. But it's not necessarily the case. When your ability to do X gives you an option, gives you a choice, but it's not an obligation, right? So you're not obligated to do the thing that nature did with the thing that you have in the past. You're free to come up with new purposes for things, and that's kind of the thing that the naturalistic fallacy user is trying to deny.
I see. Okay. So removing the behavioral component and any kind of will, this would make sense in biology, I think. For example, organs or various biological structures that served one purpose at one point, but developed and changed in what their quote unquote purpose is in the function of the body. Like that kind of thing. That's
exactly
the kind of flexibility in biology.
Yeah, exactly. That if we look at the earliest protocells, there are certain materials probably present in protocells that allowed them to function, which had some other purpose later on, in the sense that they did something useful later on. But when we use the word purpose, or when we talk about how nature designs things, we're using it in a metaphorical sense. We don't literally mean that there was any purpose or any design. All we mean is that it functions successfully as doing X, not that it was literally designed to do X by a conscious being.
Got it. Okay, so it was an equivocation. Was the
Well,
issue.
actually,
We were using the word purpose.
I would want to have a little more information. So, your question is can purpose be like objective or subjective? And I think the answer depends on the context of the conversation. So if someone specifically is asking about objective purpose, well, then the answer is clearly no, it can't be both, because they're only asking about objective purpose. And so it would depend on the context of the conversation whether or not purpose or the answer of purpose could legitimately be subjective or objective. And so I think, like, in the case of theists, they usually are talking about objective purpose. They want something that's not subjective, not hypothetical, not just based on society or your potential subjective desires. They want to know that there's some sky daddy in the sky doing it for some reason or something. In which case, in that conversation, bringing up an answer of teleonomy would probably miss the point of what they're asking. And so you would probably want to respond and say, you could just make up a law of physics that is objective, that works to govern why there's purpose in just human happiness or whatever. And then that would be equally as objective as their God, because there's equally as much evidence. And so I think you can give an objective purpose from a secular perspective that meets the criteria of what they're asking. But I don't think answering with a subjective purpose would answer the question that they intend to ask.
I see. Okay. This is a good starting point for me to do more research. I really appreciate your answers.
Yep, anytime.
Yeah, that's a great question.
One of the things I learned a long time ago about biology is that it often helps to understand that the factor of homeostasis is at the core of it. And so people who want to do like what is the best, what is the worst, aren't necessarily asking the right question. That you want to know what is the most balanced, what is the most fit for the niche that the biological structure is in.
Yeah, what can establish an equilibrium that satisfies? And a satisficing equilibrium is
exactly
going to be a range of possible equilibriums that are going to all satisfice. So the idea that like there's just this optimization for some ideal state is a misconception that people sometimes make about what natural selection is implying. It's not saying that like there is like an inevitable trend towards one state, because circumstances are changing, and there's not, for natural selection to take place, all that has to happen is reproduction, and lots of things satisfice. In other words, they're sufficient for reproduction without any sort of tiebreaker between which of them could be said to be optimal, right? They're just all sufficient to reproduce.
Isn't that the initial claim that the theist was making, that any activity, the purpose behind it is reproduction? I could see an argument to be made for that, like whether you're a plumber fixing a toilet or chopping firewood to heat your home, or just having a pleasant conversation with somebody. All of those activities lead to survival, which I think you could equate survival with procreation, like as maybe a fundamental subconscious cause for a human to do any activity.
I think they were
Like,
there's going to
saying
be a
like
surplus.
objective, like an objective purpose, like God designed it this way, therefore it has this purpose. Not like it de facto is done because evolution has caused it to do this. I think they're talking about objective from a more universal sense.
We also think of populations from just, the mom and the dad, but it's actually groups. And so it would be helping anyone almost in that type of community, in essence, is helping populations move forward because you're supporting them.
Right. Yeah, so I could even view like making a road as an activity based on procreation. Like, I might not be procreating, but it could be the group, like if there is a road that leads from one area to the next, like that's going to help people survive in one form of another.
True, but you also want to be careful of making composition division issues in the fact that, yes, for example, cells consume, but that doesn't mean that our nature as an adult is to therefore consume. It's not. There are other factors that need to be taken into consideration.
It is kind of funny though, like if a theist was talking to a woman and saying like the purpose of life is to procreate, like that is a common theme that they try to tell women, that their place is, their value is in their virginity and their ability to procreate.
Well, that's what their holy book says.
Also, just because natural selection is, in essence, grinding down on something because it is a force of nature, doesn't mean that has to be our purpose. When people are having fun and getting around boredom, like you could say, how is gambling helping the population? Well, it's alleviating a mental state, which we call boredom, and helping us maybe bond. It's helping us have, a better time and get through something. Maybe it's our job. And so there's a lot of factors at play.
There's a story actually about a board game, one of the older board games, that it was used to get through a time of famine when people didn't have a lot of food, and they played the board game to sort of like not freak out and kill each other basically while they were rationing their very limited food supply. I don't know how true the story is, but it's a very kind of beautiful etiology story for like the role that games have played along the lines you just described, right? That things that have an apparent sort of frivolity often, have some value to some people. It just seems to me like the basic misconception is whenever someone says your purpose is X or the purpose of blah is X, if you just replace the with a source of purpose for you could be blah, then you could say, yeah, I want that source of purpose. Like that's a purpose that I accept or that I embrace, right? But it's not the case that you ought or that everyone ought embrace the same purpose. Case in point, like there are many, many successful insects, like eusocial insects, where a tiny minority of the population reproduces. And these are the dominant insects on Earth, like ants, bees, species like that, right? So it's a very, very successful strategy to have specialization and to have different organisms pursue different goals, even within natural selection. There's also similar stuff with mammals where organisms will raise and adopt others, like uncling, basically, when they don't have their own offspring to take care of, because their natural instincts to take care of the young are just sort of kick in when they encounter young, regardless of whether it's theirs or not. It's not true of like, obviously we know about like lions eating other people's young or other creatures' young, but at least with dogs, which are closer to us emotionally, there's just tons of examples like this in nature where there isn't a single strategy. There's a whole bunch of opportunities, and the whole idea of like trying to tell people what their one purpose in life is, or what the one purpose that God has for the world is, or whatever, is just kind of missing the forest for looking at one particular tree and going, this tree is the whole forest. There are no other trees as beautiful as this tree. This is the true tree of your purpose or the universe's purpose. It's like, yeah, well, there's like 5, 6 other ones which also seem interesting. It's not like there's a single answer to a satisfying problem. There's a lot of viable solutions that people can pick from, and that nature sort of explores through a possibility phase space.
I love the board game example. So, like, you could make your purpose like making board games or playing board games or writing fiction or doing these things that don't seem to be tied into survival, but fundamentally they are. Like the board game became a survival mechanism.
Yeah, if you replace
ultimately
your purpose, if you replace the expression your purpose with a source of meaning or a source of purpose, like the reality is that you know, even a great composer who's like remembered for their famous symphony, whatever, also probably like had a lot of other things that were real important to them. So it's the way that people talk about purpose in life in a singular way is just kind of like a colloquial, fictional way of talking about it, as though it's that simple when it's not.
Oh, I like that. That sort of gave me the idea that like the purpose of the individual is actually a mechanism that allows them to survive and avoid like depression or whatever. Like, yeah, the composer had these other things in his life, like eating, shitting, and doing other stuff, you know, for survival. But writing the music or being the musician or taking pleasure in that pursuit is what fueled his existence.
Another part
Maybe.
that seems to draw a lot of theist problems is that we're only going to do it once, or that we only have one chance to do it. But in some ways, that makes it, I don't know if the word is special or better, but at least precious. We at least understand that we should be using it according to the time we have.
I've often felt that because we have more knowledge about the subject than is often talked in any one given sitting, that there's things that can always be brought to bear for people to consider under these topics, like the subconscious conscious divide. Our subconscious, like 95% of all the cognitive load we have going on, is the subconscious. And it's dedicated to keeping you alive. It seems to be its one sole purpose, is just extend you as long as possible. But the conscious mind seems to be trying to optimize that, make it not just a matter of survival, but thriving, you know? And if you take a look at how we appear to be as a state, like right now, don't guess about what the possible purpose is or what the, you know, what someone else's idea of what you should be doing with your life. Because if you are engaged in the act of surviving, and you're engaged in the act of thriving, you have to be reasonably self-aware of your needs. And it's not like we don't know what human needs are. You know, Maslow's had a needs list out for a long time. So think it through. You know, like, is it really that your life is lacking purpose, or perhaps there's too much purpose and you just need to kind of focus on one than the other, you know, juggle them all together.
The other thing with consciousness, I don't know why it trips people up so much, especially theists. I guess to us, I understand why we look at it and we go, oh my goodness, this is the most special thing in the universe. But then they prescribe it to everything. Consciousness has to be here and there, and it's the entire universe, and it's foundational, and it created the universe. And you're like, okay.
That's just an extension of the agency error issue, you know, because there was a survival advantage to assuming there was agency behind the rustling leaves, and so naturally we have it hardwired into our brain now to see these things and to spot these things, and I mean it's understandable, but I'm tongue in cheek about it a little bit, and I sometimes call it a kind of inherited brain damage.
Or a false positive, like you were saying, because they are saying it used to be, well, how did water come about? Well, we have to kill a goat or maybe Billy. And, you know, now it's who created the universe? Well, right now it's a whom, but it should be a what. Because there's really no whoms that prescribe natural laws.
That does appear to be the case.
But theist, if you disagree, please come join us.
Yes, please come tell me why you're not all suffering from genetic brain damage.
See, the spiciest I get, here's Millith, is that how do you tell the difference between a god talking to you and schizophrenia? So we're all being spicy. This is invite. We have put on our fedoras. Lilith, hello.
Hey. I was just wondering, T-Jump, have you thought more about your position on the ontology of propositions after your discussion with James Anderson?
They don't exist. Propositions do not
They
exist.
don't exist.
No.
So truths don't exist.
Truth is a fact of a sentence corresponding to reality. So if the sentence corresponds to reality, it's true. Truth isn't an object that exists. The table is not true.
Right, the potato is.
What?
But
No.
okay. But I think Anderson's point, right, is that like you can't identify propositions with statements, right? Because like
What?
I could write down 30 statements, right, that all say the sky is blue, right? That all have contained within them the proposition the sky is blue, right? So there would be 30 statements, right? But there would only be one proposition. So it's hard to identify propositions with statements, right?
No, it's very easy. You just wrote down the same one 30 times.
Right. So then his next example for you was like language translation, right? So I could have the statement in French, I could have the statement in English, I could have the statement in Italian, right?
Sure.
And there would be all these different statements, but they would all be referring to the same proposition.
Same idea.
You think they're referring? So you think?
Yes, we
One
come up,
second, so
we
you
come
think
up with
propositions
ideas.
are ideas?
Yes. So like a sentence is just an idea. It's a thing we've made up in our heads. And the truth of it is whether or not that thing corresponds to reality. All propositions, all sentences, all statements, they're all figments of our imagination that we've made up. Truth is whether or not those figments correspond to reality. And then you can arbitrarily take the system that we use to come up with those ideas, whether it's English or math or logic or whatever, and come up with an infinite number of them, and some of which will correspond to reality and some of which will not. And the truth is whether or not they do or not. And so it's all just a system of stuff we've made up in our head with a language. And the truth is whether or not those particular fragments of language correspond to reality or not. But none of them exist. They're just figments of our imagination. There's not like language is not out there somewhere hiding behind a rock.
Oh my god, the word books is about to kill me.
Bucks?
Books.
Books.
Not a very scary word, but somehow here it is tonight. But yes, if there's no more disagreements.
Okay, so T-Jump, so if propositions are thoughts, right?
No. So the first part is we come up with thoughts to describe reality, like the sky is purple or something. And then we have a system to organize those thoughts, which is language, English, French, logic, math. And then propositions are all the different random combinations of that language that can be expressed. So we don't express every possible thought. We don't say every possible sentence. And propositions are just all of the ones that can potentially have truth value. All of the random combinations of words that can potentially have truth value. Some of them do, some of them don't. But it's all just a figment of language that humans made up.
So propositions are a linguistic artifact?
Yes, sort of, yeah.
Sort of, yeah?
Yep.
Well, you are a linguistic artifact. You're the first thought, the private language, Wittgenstein, right? You can't get past that.
No, because language is specifically just a product of mind. He is not a product of mind. He's an existing thing. So we would not be a product of language.
Yeah,
Well,
so
he would be. His mind, his thoughts.
No.
They're his language. They're his private language.
No, so language is
there's no
specifically
such
a
thing as
thing.
private language. Read Wittgenstein.
Language is a language that we made up. So like math, logic, English. It's not a person can't be a linguistic artifact. But go ahead, Midlith. What were you going to say next?
Yeah, I was gonna say something like, okay, so Anderson pointed out to you that like it seems that like we discover truths, right? Like
Yes.
these, if you're saying they're linguistic artifacts,
Yes.
right? Then like you're saying that like if we didn't have humans around, right, to express these truths, right, then these truths don't exist, right? And that seems strange because
no.
there's like truths about.
So again,
Okay.
it's we come up with the language, and a proposition is just every random combination of words that can have a truth value. Now we don't know which of those are true or not. So like it says, Santa Claus is hiding on the other side of the moon. That's a proposition, has a truth value. And if we go to the other side of the moon, we discover it. Like no one ever came up with this idea before me, or let's assume they didn't. Then we discovered Santa was on the other side of the moon. Now that proposition existed before anybody thought it, because it's one of the infinitely many random combinations of words that we can come up with. And we discovered that it was true. But the proposition is, again, just a combination of words that we made up.
You just said the proposition existed before we discovered it.
The combination of words as a possible combinations of words existed. It did not actually exist within space-time. There was the potential combination of those words existed.
Okay.
The reason that I like science is because it is about a discovery. And the language, that's just us trying to wrap our mind around concepts.
Okay, so T-jump. It seems to me that like one of the necessary conditions for propositions is that they are shared content.
I don't know what that means.
So like if I say to you, the sky is blue, right? You have to have access, right, to the referent sky, the subject of the proposition, and the predicate blue, right?
So just to clarify, when you say that propositions have to have shared content, it has to be about reality. So like truth is that
propositions are shared content.
So if you're saying propositions are shared content, it has to be about reality. Reality is supposedly the shared content. So then, yes, I would agree that for a proposition to be true, it has to be about reality. Yes, correct.
For a proposition to be true, it'd have to be about reality. So like analytic propositions are about reality.
They're about the reality of our language, of how we organize language. But I wouldn't say like if I said the horse was running, rather the horse was running, which is the correct sentence. There isn't an objective truth value there. There's a subjective truth value of hypothetical, like which one is the correct English.
Zabe, what do you think language is?
I think Millith is the one talking, not Zabe.
Oh, sorry, Millith. I'm sorry, Millith. What do you think language is?
I think language is a game that we play to communicate propositions and other intentional states to each other.
What do you think propositions are? I think is what she's actually asking.
Platonic objects.
Yeah, like T-Jump said, what are propositions then to you?
He said platonic objects.
Platonic objects.
Not really sure where to go. I don't really understand. It's a game that they are playing, and so.
What's the difference on your view of platonic objects between what you mean by platonic objects and someone just talking about?
Yeah, so like
discoverable. Hold on, I just want to finish the sentence. If someone is just saying that something is a discoverable combination, or configuration, or structure, there could be an infinite number of such things, or nearly infinite, that could be independently discovered by investigators who attempt the same thing or have similar environmental conditions or whatever, or we're starting presuppositions and they can get to similar endpoints. What makes you think that all of those possibilities are platonic objects that exist outside of just being discoverable combinations or results?
So yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. But so look, I'm like a Phrygian Platonist, right? So like, I take the argument that propositions are not identical with any physical things, and propositions are not identical with any mental things. I take that seriously. So I conclude that there is most likely a third type of thing, right? And that's basically where I leave it. That's as much as I can say about propositions, is that they're neither mental nor physical.
Can I just go back to what do you mean by, because I'm looking up Platonic objects and there's no way this could be what you mean by language. So what do you mean by Platonic objects?
I mean that there's a third type of ontological thing that's neither spatially located nor temporally located. That
This is what you think
instantiations.
language is?
Proposition.
No, I think language is a word game that we play. Like language is a game that we play, like a la Wittgenstein.
So you meant propositions. That's what you think propositions are.
Yes, that's what I think propositions are.
Like, I don't see how your complex definition. It seems weird to call it a word game when it seems to be just concepts. We make up different concepts that we need to subscribe and to communicate with other humans on the planes and now just around to each other in the office. But sometimes it's very serious and sometimes it's emotional. It's not really, like you say, a game. Like, I can understand how sometimes we have games with each other, but when you're like, oh my god, your mother died, it's really a game. It's more the concept that we're trying to communicate.
So by game there, what he means is we're combining words in order to try to express propositions. And so the language part,
concepts.
Yeah. And so that part wasn't really relevant to the main question you were asking him. What does he think propositions are? Propositions are Platonic objects, and the game we play is just trying to describe those propositions. So that part wasn't really relevant. It's just how we
But
use language.
then, what are these Platonic objects? Because I'm looking at a few definitions, and it just seems extremely not related to anything having to do with talking.
Well, they're also kind of an outdated notion, so I mean, it's going to be difficult.
Like 4 faces, 6 faces, 8 faces, 12 faces, 20 faces. This does look like a video game, but it's not something that would be, having anything to do with reality, unless you're building a video game or we're talking about spatial us walking.
So Platonic objects are a new ontology. You got natural stuff, you got supernatural stuff, and then you got Platonic stuff. It's like a new kind of thing. There's no evidence for whatsoever, and he's saying that Platonic objects are this new kind of thing that's just out there, outside of space and time, and just govern the universe essentially.
Well, I think you're begging the question a little bit against the Platonist, right? By saying that Platonic objects don't have any evidence for them, right? So I gave you Frager's argument. I can more explicitly walk you through Frager's argument, right? So I take those types of arguments to be evidence for Platonic objects.
Those are easily explainable in the way that I presented. It's just language. We made up a language. There's infinitely many ways you can combine those words. Some of those can correspond to reality, some of them don't, and that fully explains all proposed propositions as existing just as figments of language or potential figments of language, and you don't need any reference to Platonic objects. And I believe that's the consensus among most scientists and philosophers.
If we're starting with and if we have to start with conceptual space by dint of our own minds, and then we have to also acknowledge that the conceptual space isn't the only space that exists. We can, at the bare minimum, say there's 2 states of what ontology, one might say, but where would you get any evidence for a third from that? Especially given the fact you have to start from within one of those ontologies. You don't have a choice.
I think I have arguments.
Are you familiar with Wittgenstein's treatment of language games and the idea of family resemblances being a more appropriate way of characterizing the meanings of language rather than like Platonic forms.
No, I'm familiar with Wittgenstein to a degree. I'm not an expert.
Okay. The reason I brought it up is because you mentioned that you think language is the game. And I'm not an expert in Frege either, so that's maybe Frege also talks about that, and I'm not familiar with that. But I'm most familiar with the idea of language as a game from Wittgenstein, and I would suggest looking into that. And yeah, Wittgenstein rejects general explanations and absolute equivalencies. He says that it's just the only kind of relation that really exists is within language is like resemblance relations, which people equate to being like form participation or category inclusion. But it's not the case that there's one like fixed set of terms and there are things that absolutely participate with those terms or do not. The terms are a constant negotiated game being developed over time by way of family resemblance between the usage of the term to one person and the usage of the term to another person. They're able to successfully play the game. That's the only thing that language has to do is, perpetuate itself as a game that accomplishes some purpose. It doesn't have to like result in some absolute systematized philosophical ontology of like forms or whatever you think exists.
Yeah, language is not the reason that I think Platonic objects exist, right? It's propositions that are the reason I think Platonic objects exist.
Because something's denoted by.
But I'm just going to say something like, right, like so, like it's a little bit technical, right? But there's a difference between like talking about how language works, right, and how referent works. So, like, if you like look at Kripke, right, like what is it? It's synthetic a priori identities, right? So like we like in the past, like we thought there was an evening star and a morning star, right? But we came to learn synthetically that the evening star and the morning star is Venus, right? So like there's a there's an analytic identity between the evening star and the morning star and Venus, right? But it's synthetically discovered. So like referent, like I forget what Kripke's word for it is. It's like fixed referent, like but like perma-fixed referent, right? When it comes to like proper names or identity relations.
He just calls them directly referential, yeah.
Yeah, I forget the term. Sorry. Right.
Direct reference, yeah. Or rigid
So, like,
designators. Is that the word you're looking for?
A rigid designator. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Yeah. So like the point is that right, like the issue of language is relevant for propositions, right? But the real issue for propositions, right, is referent. Like when I have a subject of a proposition and a predicate of a proposition, right? How are we ensuring that your communication of the subject and the predicate, right? I am getting the same referent in my head that you're speaking about, right? Like, so the point is that like thoughts are epistemically private, right? So like it can't be the case, right, that the proposition is identical with your thought about it, because I have no access epistemically to your thought about the proposition, right? So there's nothing that's gonna like secure the consistent referent across the linguistic expression, right? If there's no such thing as a proposition, or if the proposition is identical with your thoughts.
But there's no problem with like treating a proposition as the thing denoted by a declarative sentence without granting it some kind of absolute ontology outside of its being like a fictional abstraction.
Well, I just don't know what you mean by the thing denoted by, right? So, like, if it's a fictional abstraction, right, then it's going to be identical with one particular person's thought about it, right?
Sure.
Let me put it this way. Suppose you have two people that are both playing a game, but they don't know the rules exactly the same as each other, right? Maybe one person thinks the rules work this way, and the other person thinks the rules work that way. Now, while they play the game in ways where their rules seem to overlap, they're going to have no awareness that they're not actually following the same rules, right? And so this is why like Wittgenstein in like rules in private language is trying to say that just because two people appear to agree on their definitions of a thing doesn't mean that there is this like rigid thing that is being referred to analytically. It just means that they have a similar enough family resemblance or equivalency that it's a successful playing of the game. I mean, there's a whole bunch of Wittgenstein that Kripke read and analyzed that's referred to collectively as Kripkenstein. If you're already
So
a
yeah, like
Kripke fan, I would look at that.
I think you're just oscillating between two issues, right? So like, let's just focus on the issue of the ontology of propositions and proper referent, right? So like, imagine that like the sky is blue, the ontology of that proposition, right? So like you speak the statement, the sky is blue, right? And my understanding is that like the statement would reference the proposition, the sky is blue, right? But you're saying something like the proposition is either a thought in my mind, right? Or it's just the statement, right? So like, if the proposition is just a thought in your mind, right, then like when you say the sky is blue, right, you could be colorblind, right, and you could think blue is red, right, and I could not be colorblind and I could think blue is blue, right, and we would both give the same truth value to that proposition, right, but we would be applying different predicates, right? So like, that's the problem of identifying propositions with thoughts, right? And identifying
Wait,
propositions
what's
with
the
the
problem
statement.
there? What's the problem there? So like, yeah, I say the sky is blue, but you see black. Who cares? And so what?
Well, there's just different truth values that we would give, right? And like they would both be technically true, right? One would say red, the sky is blue means the sky is red, and one would say the sky is blue means the sky is blue, and they would both say that's true, right?
So again, what's the problem? So that what sentence would be: the sky appears this way to me. That's fine. But like, if you want to say objectively, what is objectively true in reality? Well, they'd both be false. The sky doesn't have any color. Or you could say it have some kind of wavelength, and that would have an objective truth value, which would correspond to. But I don't see any problem here or any requirement to posit some new kind of magic third ontology that there's no evidence for. What's the problem here?
Well, what do you mean? What's the problem here? Like, I don't understand. You. So,
What
what is
about
exactly
this?
your position, T-Jump?
What about
Is it
this
are the
statement?
proposition statements,
Well, no. So
or are the
what about
propositions
this
thoughts?
is not fully explained by propositions are a random combination of semantics with no ontology whatsoever. So like, the sky is blue is a sentence that was just one of the many combinations of words that we came up with in English. And the things they're referring to is a thing in reality. There's no further propositions. They're just garbage. We don't care. They're a waste of time. And that's good enough. And so when they say the sky is blue, he's wrong. When the guy says the sky is red, he's wrong too. And when they say the sky has this wavelength of light reflects off it, that guy's right. And whether or not their personal subjective experience is irrelevant unless they change the sentence to be, from my perspective, it appears blue or whatever. And so I don't see any need to reference this new kind of ontology to answer all of that. And I see no problems with the explanation I just gave without referencing any kind of Platonic objects.
After you respond, Melith, I just want to say something.
No, you can go.
Well, that's actually so our eyes are faulty. That is true. And so we could get bad results from the data or maybe incomplete results because we're getting things not like color or nonetheless, there's going to be things that are more concrete. And just for an example, whether we're in front of a wall or not. And so when we're describing, yes, you're in front of the wall, or no, you're not, it's going to be something that we can all share. It's reality, and we're just trying to communicate to the other person what that is.
Um,
I don't know. It just sounds like, to be honest, some of the things you're trying to overcomplicate in trying to create this third thing, when it just seems to be like, I understand there are some things out there we could consider maybe like a game. I think in some ways morality has to do with something like a game theory, where we're trying to use social communication. But I don't think that a game is the primary purpose. I think we're just trying to communicate. The wall is in front of you, and that is either true or not true.
It's kind of why it helps to make
Yeah, so
something about reality, right? Because we're not in control of it. So the more concrete thing you can find about reality to serve as your point of commonality.
I'm also going to bring Max up here while you're answering. Oh, he already left. Okay, so there was a Christian in chat, the whole cross and everything. So if you want to come up, feel free to come up, and you can just hang out while the person is still talking. And so if you believe that a God is real, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, ooh, there's Nephilim free. Okay, I'm going to put you in the background. We're still talking with Millith. I at least want him to finish up whatever he's talking about.
well, I'll just make this one last point. So like T-Jump, like in your talk with Anderson, right? Anderson makes this point that like there are truths about the natural numbers, right, that will never be expressed in sentences, and will never be conceived of by any human thought, right?
Not maybe. So like natural numbers don't exist. They're also a human product of a language. So it's like saying there's truths about English that people will never express or something. And if you're saying by true that there's some system that we use to govern the way we use these things in English or in the language that we've denoted, like mathematics or whatever, then yes, in that system, there are true things that correspond to that system, but it's not true in correspondence to reality. It's just a system like Harry Potter is white is true. Like it's not actually true. There's no correspondence to reality. That it would be. It's no more true than to say he's black or Mexican or Japanese. But in the context of the story, we say it's true. And so the same thing would be true in mathematics. That to say there's something true about natural numbers is just given our current system of mathematics. It's not correspondent to reality necessarily.
Yeah, like
so we use the word true to refer to both reality and things we've made up, systems we've made up, like the true organization of a sentence in English, true uses of a comma. And the second
Right, so,
case
like,
is not true. It's not true at all. There's no truth there.
T-Jump, do you think propositions have any like status aside from being expressions linguistically?
No, not really.
Right. Okay. So
it's just
like,
a subset of them that happen to be able to be true or false.
Well, the subset
Propositions are immaterial abstracts.
Right. Well, nothing's true then. Like T-Jump, like Anderson pointed this out to you as well, right? Like if propositions, right, are just statements, right, and we think propositions are the primary truth bearers, right, then nothing's true.
No, truth is when a sentence corresponds to reality, and so the sentence is true.
Truth is
if
when
it describes reality.
the predicate in a proposition corresponds to the subject in a way that's true of reality.
It just corresponds to reality. So if it corresponds to reality, it's true. And if it's not true. That simple.
But so in a proposition, the predicate applies to the subject.
No, that's false. So like I could say Harry Potter is white, and you could say that's true because the predicate corresponds to the subject, but it isn't true about reality. There's no correspondence to reality there. So that sentence is objectively not true. It is not objectively true. You can make a subject that is the way we use English, or the subject can be the way I perceive it. Like the sky seems red because I'm colorblind, but that's all irrelevant. That's not truth. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. So relation to the subject is irrelevant to truth. It's just a convenient thing we use to describe it, but it's not relevant. The only thing that's true is, does it correspond to reality? Full stop.
Does
Can I just ask?
correspond to reality?
I know we have Nephilim free in here. I just have to ask. Say you have a sister or a brother, okay? And you're sitting down at a restaurant, and they're like, hey, buy me a chocolate milkshake. And then they walk away. You've already agreed upon it. You said you were going to treat them Is it a true statement that they want a chocolate milkshake?
Is it a true
I
statement
don't know
that they
that
want
person's internal
a chocolate milkshake? Like
desires
it
or if they're
depends on
deceiving
their
some.
it depends on their subjective intention, and
Even-
like I don't have access to that. Like I don't know for sure if it's a true
Even
statement.
though they said that they wanted a
Yes.
chocolate milkshake,
Correct.
and we're supposed to be buying them food. So in this, generally speaking, in this situation, you wouldn't buy them because you have no idea if they actually want a milkshake.
No, I have an inductive reason to think that they want a chocolate milkshake, right? I just don't know if you want to say knowledge. It's like something close to certainty, right? Then I don't know that what their intentional state is,
But it
right?
seems
Speaking
like
of
you have
chocolate,
a
I'm gonna get some
perception-
ice cream while you guys talk about what's true philosophically.
I just it seems like it's trying to overcomplicate. Like, and then if you're in front of the road and you see this concrete barrier, would you walk away from it or would you try to walk through the concrete barrier because it may not be a truth statement or it may not be truthful?
What?
If you are walking and you see that concrete wall, is it true that there's a wall there?
No, it is like there is a wall there, right? So the fact of the matter is that there's a wall there, right? And then if I were to express a proposition about the wall, right, then that proposition would bear the property of truth, right? So the proposition would be true. Propositions are truth bearers, facts in the world are truth makers.
So it is true. We can say it's a true statement. You're walking in front of the wall. It's true.
But you
Well, it
could take
depends.
the view as
Am I in fact walking in front of the wall?
Yes.
So then,
Has to
yes,
be like that.
it's a true proposition.
Okay, there we go. And then you communicate to your sister or brother, hey, I'm walking, and don't walk in front of the wall. Go around it. Language, it's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this whole debate about the ontology of propositions relates to truth making and truth bearing. But if you take a deflationary truth making view, which says that truth makers aren't things that exist independent of language, but they're actually contextual within it, that there's just relationships between propositions.
Truth makers or truth bearers?
Truth makers, right? So a deflationary view on truth making is compatible with a belief that the ontology of propositions is not the case. So like this is why Kripke and Wittgenstein disagree about this stuff, right? Kripke believed, like Wittgenstein believed in this stuff earlier in his career, and then he just saw that there were problems with it and kind of drifted away from it. And Kripke stuck with it and kind of doubled down on it. It's an unsettled question in philosophy, and I mean, more power to you if you want to pick a side, but I don't think it's a resolved question.
And we also have been saying a final word, and so this is the real final word. You can keep on, but we have to at least hand it over to, I think Neff definitely believes in a God.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you so much, Mel. Still a fun conversation, and keep on coming on. And all right, Neff, I know that you said you were getting ice cream, but I'm also offering the chance to hand it off. If not, I'm going to keep on saying to theists, God does not exist. Prophets do not exist. Oh, here we go. Did I throw out enough bait?
Who?
Neffy?
Who's that?
It's you.
No T Jumpy. I'm not Neffy.
You can call me T Jumpy. That's fine. It just uses the first
Well, I won't
first
talk to you
four
if you're
letters.
Gonna,
and
if
the
you're
last
gonna if you're gonna try to insult me, you're not worth talking to. Anybody else want to talk?
Using a nickname is an insult?
You could also call
What's wrong
me
with you?
Amy.
I mean, be an adult here. Come on.
What? Well,
Yeah,
it's
people
taking
use
the
nicknames
first four letters and the
trying to
last
get
three letters
on.
and putting them together. It's just the first four.
No, it's an insult. It's
How is it an insult?
using a childlike It's using a childlike nickname for
Offense is
somebody.
never given. It
It's
is
just an
taken.
adolescent thing to do.
What?
It's adolescent behavior.
I think that's your adolescent subjective opinion. Is just shortening your name.
Well, talk to me like an adult, and I'll treat you like one.
Your subjective opinion is irrelevant to me. It's not being
Okay.
childlike. And
Well, you heard what I said.
I don't care what you said. You're wrong, as typical.
No, everybody knows I'm right.
Everybody. Okay.
That's a good
Am
one.
I included in everybody?
Did you have a question or comment,
I'll be
nephew?
back.
Something you want to talk about? Because if not, we can just move back to the stage and move on to somebody else.
Well, you can find somebody else to talk to.
Well, did you have something you wanted to talk about?
Well, I thought you guys were going to do something other than debate about philosophy,
Right.
which is a common.
So did you?
We are.
I thought you guys were going to talk about, theism, evolution, creation, atheism, these
Go for it.
things and stuff.
Go for it. Bring up whatever you'd like.
Well, I just say, how is it possible that atheism is rational or plausible?
Corresponds to the evidence. It uses requirements that can differentiate imagination from reality. It's based on evidence. It's based on
evidence. Is there the atheism is correct?
Yes, because the only posited experiences or evidence of a god are all things that have been proven wrong. The evidence for God is equivalent to the evidence of leprechauns and Santa.
That's not correct.
It is based on
Human beings have
science.
personally, you can't prove wrong the personal experiences millions of people have had with God.
Yes, you can.
You can't prove that wrong.
You can.
So that statement was incorrect.
Well, you can actually. It's very, very easy to
And
prove.
then
Wait,
you're
let's
also
go with just that
why are
one.
you talking over it?
Because you brought up a point that I wanted to have a conversation about, which was
Okay, so prove all the personal experiences, private experiences people have with God are wrong.
yes, we can do that very easily because we know for a fact that's what I'm doing right now. So we know for a fact that there are these things called fallacies, biases, illusions, misconceptions that exist in the brain, and they exist in all human brains. And so if your experience falls into the category of a thing we already know exists, then that is fully explained by the content of your brain. So like if you see shapes on the ceiling, that's a known condition. We have a known condition in the brain that explains that. So your experience is not that there are actually shapes on the ceiling, it's you had a delusion. Same thing applies to personal experiences of a god, Reiki healings, demons, spirits, ghosts. All of the personal experiences of Christianity are exactly the same as the personal experiences of leprechauns, which are an actual thing. There's actually a disease where people see leprechauns. We know this, it's been discovered, and so it's been proven that these personal experiences are bunk.
So you made two mistakes. First off, you said because we can prove, and you can't, that people's private experiences experiencing leprechauns is false, and you haven't. Nobody have.
What?
That means, therefore, private experiences with God are false. So that's a false equivocation. One does you haven't proven one, and even if you did, it wouldn't prove the other.
Wait, which one didn't I prove? Because like
I don't know how you went to that law.
Wait, which one didn't I prove?
And then
which
one? You haven't proven any private experiences.
Wait, so Nephilim, did you say?
Why are you talking over
because
me?
you said a point I wanted to have a conversation about.
No, it's my turn to say something.
The way a conversation works.
And then you haven't proved. Okay, so you're failing here.
The way
I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. Try again someday when you have courage.
Is you have to say
get the courage
that I get to say
get
something.
The courage.
So you made a claim that I didn't prove something about leprechauns. We have proven in neurology, people see leprechauns. That has been proven. This is a known disease. You can look it up. It's a thing. We know. So this has been proven. You were wrong about that. It has been proven. And so then you would go on to the next point. That's how a conversation works. But Neffy's gone. Anybody else? Questions, comments, philosophy, politics, whatever.
And we had someone who very seriously tried to defend that gnomes would steal the underwear and shoes of children in Vietnam and the American soldiers, those two groups specifically. So
free as profit.
Praise Lucky Charms.
Hello.
And how is Slam Duke? Slum Duke.
Close enough. You can call me Slum Dookie too. That works.
Oh my.
T-jump. You're familiar with the teletransporter paradox, right?
The one where you get teleported and you're not the same person or something.
Well, it's like I guess the one formulation's like, or X might know too, where they like you copy your molecular structure and then delete you and like beam you to Mars or something and rebuild you. Is that I think on like the the whatever it's called, the Phil Paper survey.
Yeah.
I think most philosophers think that results in death, like whatever the qualia was, like it dies and then that's a new person. Would you agree?
Potentially.
Okay, I don't know. This one bothers me. I've been trying to work it out because, like, if it's not, then couldn't you like revive everybody if you could retrieve their information somehow, like a super powerful AI, like retrieve all the information from a black hole or something and like revive everyone?
They could reorganize the particles in such a way that the same conscious experience or conscious memories would exist, yes. But I think that the consequence of the argument that if we teleport and die is that essentially whenever your brain ceases the electrical signals for a temporary amount of time and restarts them, you also die. And so the question is, what makes you you? Is it the consistent stream of the conscious experience via some kind of process that is ongoing in the brain, in which case anytime that process dies, like in the case of a seizure or temporary brain death, you would equally as much die as you would in the teleporter example. And so if what makes you you is the physical construct of your brain, then we could we could teleport you and still be you just fine, because what makes you you is your brain, not necessarily the stream of consciousness. And if what makes you you is the stream of consciousness, then every time you fall asleep, potentially you could die. And so it depends on how you define you as you.
So, what if instead of like, what if you copied your molecular structure but didn't delete the old one and just beamed another one to Mars? How can there be two then? Like, wouldn't that still be two separate people, or is it just like
Again, it
how does that work?
depends how you define you. If you define you as the constant stream of conscious experience, then that would be a different person. If you define you as the brain states or the physical constituents, then that would be the same person for a brief second, and then they have new experiences, and they'd be two different yous.
But like, so I guess what would you be more inclined to believe? Like, I'm just wondering, like, if someone did that to me, is what I'm experiencing right now, is that gonna continue? Like, if I get revived in the future or something?
Is what you are going to experience depends again how you define you. If it's the physical brain state, yeah. If it's the conscious stream of experience, no.
Gotcha. So how do you define you?
An unsolved problem, but I think that AI will fix it. And then once AI discovers the fundamental nature of consciousness and identity, then whatever answer they give is the right answer. That's my position.
Hopefully the singularity can revive me from a black hole, then that'd be pretty cool. But
or just make you invincible, so that we can, like, more likely what's going to happen is, like, we're going to put a VR headset on, so you're going to have a finite location in a computer somewhere, and the VR headset is just going to be able to teleport your experience infinitely far as it wants, so you don't actually have to travel anywhere, so you can maintain your constant steady stream of consciousness and still go as far as you want anywhere.
But I guess we'll probably be dead by that point. But
no, I plan to live
like,
forever.
That's right. My bad. And the other thing, I guess, is Thomism or Thomism. Dude, that one gets me. I'm trying to work. Yeah,
I was gonna
don't
say,
know.
if this is
How do you feel about Thomism, Mr. Aquinas? This one, I don't know. Like divine, like it's
very stupid.
Divine simplicity.
Very stupid.
Well, yeah, it seems. I'm trying to figure out if it makes sense. Like,
it does not.
One of the things is God is identical to his properties. Does that make sense?
Yes, his aseity, God's aseity, is perfectly simple. So his essence and existence are the same thing. He is pure existence and pure essence. It's very stupid.
But does that make sense?
No.
Oh, okay, why not? Because I'm inclined to believe it doesn't, but
because they're arbitrarily assigning properties to things that have no proven existence. So it's like if I said there is a new substance in the universe called the potato stuff, and the potato stuff has this property of being both mass and spin at the same time. Obviously, this is bullshit. I just made it up. But what they're doing is the same thing. They're making up a new property called the magical greatness aseity property. You're saying, well, it's just a combination of all the other stuff. It does all of this stuff in one thing. Is there any evidence for this? No, there isn't. It's complete bullshit. Is it logically possible? Sure, like logically possible. You could derive all of the laws of physics into one thing. Sure. And then they're saying that these new properties aren't just laws of physics. They're saying that there's like potentiality and actuality are the new properties, and these are actual things that exist rather than emergent properties from laws of physics, which is stupid. So that's the main problem. They're making up these new properties and saying that these things supersede physics rather than are emergent properties of physics.
Okay. And then I guess the other thing they claim is that whatever is fundamental has to not be composite. I don't get why. So does that make sense, or can it be composite?
That's just a simplicity
Why
argument.
can't it be composite?
So in philosophy and science, they have a preference for simplicity. The simpler the thing is, usually the better hypothesis is, and they're taking that to the extreme and saying that, well, what's the simplest thing we can do? Let's put everything and pack it into one just pure essence-y stuff, which is stupid. And so they're saying, well, we'll just make the simplest hypothesis ever. My simplest sky daddy is bigger than your simplest sky daddy. So the simplest thing ever, just one essence of essence, pure essence, simplest thing ever. Ha! And that's all they're doing.
So, but the fundamental thing could be made up of parts, though, right? That makes sense.
Logically, yes. There's no logical contradiction with multiple fundamental necessary beings. No, none whatsoever.
Okay. And then I guess if you believe God's existence is the same as his essence or whatever, do they believe his God is identical with his nature? Is that the same thing?
That would be one of it. But they mean like literally every aspect of God is one thing: his omniscience, his omnipotence, his consciousness, his
yeah. But that doesn't make sense,
right,
because
no
when you ask them about the Euthyphro dilemma, they'll say morality is God's nature, and then they're differentiating between his consciousness and his nature, right?
Yep. And so that's a contradiction. They're not allowed to do that in Thomism.
So don't all Thomists have to be divine command theorists?
Well, they're bothists. So they're both, because it's all the same thing. So their answer to the Euthyphro dilemma is both, because they're the same thing.
Okay. I think that's all I got for now. Thanks.
Yep.
Are there any examples of any time where essence precedes existence, or is it
Harry Potter,
still true that
unicorns, AI,
so imaginary things.
B-37, B-35 plane, its essence was invented and then its existence came later? I don't think there is such a thing as essence, so I think that's just a made-up property.
Also, if essence is just supposed to be the definition of a thing, then you can just dispense with the word because you already have the word definition without any inflationary metaphysics.
I think it's supposed to denote more than that. It's supposed to be like the fundamental nature of the thing or whatever.
I think essence is defined as non-incidental properties, necessary properties.
Apollo, you got anything for us? Is your mic working? Can you guys hear him?
Yeah, what's up?
Nothing.
Oh, now I can hear him.
I wasn't speaking.
Gotcha. You got a question?
Just move this thing down my screen real quick before I ask the question. Give me a sec.
Okay.
That better not be a porn reference.
Can you hear me?
Yep. We can.
So the first question I have is how do you argue with a trivialist?
What's a trivialist?
Trivialist is anyone who believes that every proposition is true.
So there's a well-known defense of trivialism by Paul Cabet that shows that a number of philosophical ideas lead to or can be used to justify trivialism, including the principle of sufficient reason.
Yeah, like Kane Baker, for example, is a trivialist. But I'm asking Tom Jump for his response to trivialism. It's like, how do you argue with the trivialist?
1 second. Every proposition is true.
No, trivial. I don't think any of them are true.
Well, Apollo.
No, they say every proposition is true.
Every proposition is true, including a contradiction. So, like, A
Yeah,
and not A.
once it's a proposition.
Sorry?
Yeah, once it is a proposition that is true under trivialism, of course.
But
Anything
so,
else?
are you familiar with truth tables in like first order proposition and predicate logic?
How is this relevant to countering trivialism?
It's relevant because trivialism is just denying like the well trodden logical fact
the truth
that
tables you're going to utilize is going to be up on the
contradictions
logic system,
are not
by the way.
contradictions are by definition false, right? If trivialism is just denying that, then
That's
I would
just
want
going
to
under
reason.
classical logic.
Wait
Yeah.
until
Okay.
he's done.
Exactly. So you're employing trivialism is some sort of other logic.
Of course, it denies classical logic, but it also affirms classical logic. It's going to say classical logic is both true and not true. Everything you're saying is consistent with trivialism.
Every proposition is true, right? So the proposition.
When you're saying when the trivialist says that classical logic is true, that's consistent with trivialism.
What was your original question?
Oh yeah, I was asking you, T-Jump. What would your response to trivialism be? Like, if someone was to say every proposition is true,
you're an idiot.
How do you argue against it?
You're an idiot. Is that proposition true?
Yep.
Is T-Jump right true?
Yeah, but they're also
Are you
going to say
wrong?
it's true
Are
that
you
T-Jump is
wrong?
not
Is
right.
that true?
Are you talking to me or the trivialist?
It's hypothetical trivialist.
Is trivialism false? True?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is your mom fat? Is that true?
But then, everything is true.
That's how I'd argue against a trivialist. I just.
But I don't.
make
Yeah, I
it
don't
clear.
understand. I don't understand how it could be right because there are false things, and so therefore it is incorrect.
Okay. Look, I got another question. The other question, T-Jump, is why do you think that Neoplatonism, or you could say Thomism, regarding divine simplicity, is gibberish?
For the reasons I stated before, that you are asserting properties that have no evidence, that are new into the universe, and saying essentially just combining all of the other properties into the universe and trying to filter them down to these new made up properties. So it's essentially my simplicity Sky Daddy is better than your simplicity Sky Daddy. That's all it is. There's no evidence for it. It's not coherent. There's no justification for it. It's just making crap up.
When you're saying it's not coherent, it's just something which is unintelligible or logically contradictory.
Yes.
No, like which one is it? Like unintelligible or logically contradictory? Both?
Probably both. So like saying that God has these properties: omniscience, omnibenevolence, consciousness, intentionality, blah, blah, blah. And all of these are a single essence of aseity, is both incoherent and most likely logically contradictory.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Did you say something else?
Finally, simple being.
But can God hear you?
I was bugging out. I'm bugging out.
Okay.
Am I good now?
Maybe. Go try.
Perfect. So I was going to say that, as you mentioned, people who define simplicity, you talk about how it is contradictory for them to assign these properties to aseity. What do you think about Platonism's view, whereas he adopts a divine simplicity view, but he does not believe the being that grounds all existence has any consciousness?
Probably going to have the same problem. I don't know what properties he's asserting, but if you're saying that there are lots of things,
he doesn't assert any properties.
No. So that is the proposition that's in question. So there's lots of typical things that are considered properties: omniscience, omnibenevolence, whatever. And so things that we typically think of as separate properties, he's going to say are all one property. And so it would depend on which of the things that are typically understood to be separate properties he is asserting are magically squished together into his magic aseity property.
The thing is, though, if you read like the Aeneid, for example, he never specified any of the omni properties, but he does in fact say that one is absolutely transcendent of the many, which is, for example, us, which are mere logical composites. That's the only thing I can actually say about how he describes or how he conceives this being itself. But I was just curious about how you'd specifically attack this being's existence and maybe point out the one or two contradictions in this
that's what I was doing.
concept.
So in order to evaluate a claim like that, you would have to go through and say, okay, what are typically what we think of as individual properties, mass, energy, omnipotence, omnibenevolence. What is it that we typically think of as many different properties that would constitute or fit into this singular aseity thing? What does the singular aseity thing do? What is it capable of? And we could define those into the classes of things that we normally think of as different properties. And then we can say, oh, so you've squished all these together. And I'd say, okay, let me add or subtract some of these and see if, let's add the potato property. Can I add the potato property to this? If yes, or if no, why not? Why is this different from you adding this other property? And so it would have to be a conversation about what properties he's sticking into the society garbage and whether there's justification for those as opposed to potatoes or anything else I can assert for no reason.
I think the rejoinders to the potato property argument would be something like, well, if the being is divinely simple and has no physical properties, then it cannot have a potato property because a potato is physical.
Well, I know. So I'd then say that, oh no, the physical potato we see is only a representation of the true essence of potato-ness. The essence of potato-ness is something far more simple and non-physical, and so it's not true that potatoes are physical. And so I'd essentially take any criticism that I would level against their properties and invert it to show that their same retort can be applied to the potato property, which would then de facto show that all other justifications are arbitrary because they can be used equally well for the potato as they can for the properties that they are asserting.
Just to be clear, Tom Jump, when you talk about potato properties, I want to make sure we're on the same page here. When you're talking about potato properties, are you like what exactly would you consider to be a property of potatoes?
The essence of potatoes, this pure aseity of potatoes. There's like, it's a magical spiritual essence of potatoes that if it didn't exist, no potatoes would exist, and exist timelessly and spacelessly, that governs the essence of all potatoes in all possible worlds. The magical potato property.
I'm going to give my personal understanding of what you're talking about. Okay, so when people usually use the word aseity and whatever, they're usually talking about an essence. They're usually talking about the properties, which makes this thing as this specific unique identity. And this specific unique identity that makes it distinct from other things, right? So when you're using the word aseity and so on, the impression that I'm getting is that you're talking about some specific properties, which makes this thing a potato and not something like a rock, for example. Some essential properties which acts as a distinguishing feature.
Right. And I'm saying there's one more. There's one more. So there's one new property that makes something a potato that we just haven't discovered yet. It's the magical essence of potato property. And it's in there. We've never seen it. There's no evidence of it, but it's in there and it's required for every potato in the universe. And it's something that's outside of space and time, and it's the Platonic essence of potato property.
By the way, how do you think we determine the essences of objects? How do you think we know the essences of objects?
Making shit up.
Okay, so here's my idea. I believe that's how we determine the essence of something is by starting off with some base concept. So, for example,
Just going to point out there, I have had
wait, hold on there. I'd like to finish what I was saying, please. I'd really appreciate it. Please. I was going to say to T-John that I want his idea on this. So the base concept of like a triangle, for example, is that every triangle has to add up to 180 degrees. That's one example. So this is like an essential feature of something to be a triangle. So then I use this concept to then say, okay, this shirt cannot be a triangle because it does not add up to 180 degrees, etc., etc. But you're saying something else, like, well, your response is a bit vague. It can maybe be consistent with my response or my interpretation of how we determine essences, but who knows? What do you got to say about this?
So I would say that there has to be some kind of a truth value to the first statement, that a triangle has three sides or necessarily has three sides. There has to be some correspondence in reality to that statement. Otherwise, the shirt is equally as much a triangle by virtue of it's just labeled a triangle. So why do we label this three-sided thing a triangle? Well, it's because we made it up. We literally just made it up. There's no essence there. There's no requirement there. It's just we labeled this shape a triangle and we didn't label the shirt a triangle. That's why the shape is the triangle and the shirt is not a triangle.
Pardon, Mr. Jump. So when you talk,
so like it seems to me that like the internal angles of a triangle adding up to 180 degrees is not an essential property of triangles, right? Because that's only true in Euclidean space, right? It's not true of triangles in non-Euclidean space. So like on a curved surface.
Yeah, firstly, that's not only wrong, but like even though the statement regarding the distinction between Euclidean spaces and non-Euclidean spaces is correct, the objection you give was quite literally just wrong and bad. But I'm not really focusing on talking to you. I'm focusing to talk to T-Jump personally. No offense.
Wrong
But
and
T-Jump, I was
bad
gonna
is not a
say.
crime.
But T-Jump, I was gonna say something. I forgot my question. What did before the guy intervened? What was your point before that? I forgot.
There's no truth content to saying that a triangle
Oh yeah,
requires.
no correspondence to reality. I remember now. I was going to ask you this question in response. Do you believe that every proposition, for it to be true, there has to be some isomorphic relation to reality?
It has to correspond to reality, yeah.
Okay, so let's say, for example, let's say they're like when they say reality, are you talking about the physical external world?
All things that exist.
All things that exist. So, do you believe that the law of identity is true?
Sort of. So the law of identity corresponds to the way reality is, sure.
Okay, so that would mean that you don't think the law of identity would apply to imaginary things, right?
What?
So, for example, imaginary things are things which aren't a part of reality, correct?
Well, they're a
So,
part of reality in your
if I say that
imagination.
a unicorn, or pardon?
It's in your imagination, so it's a figment of your imagination, which exists a part of reality. Yes. Like, do unicorns actually exist? No, there's no like unicorn outside of your imagination.
Okay, so you take imagination to be a part of the category of realistic objects, or things which are a part of reality.
Yes, your imagination, your brain is a thing in reality, unfortunately.
Do you think it is possible for the law of identity to apply to some object which is inconceivable by human beings?
Sure. All it has to, as long as it exists in reality, whether we can conceive of it or not, doesn't matter.
So let's say it is inconceivable, like we cannot conceive of the object and it does not exist in reality. Do you think the law of identity would apply to it, or it is necessarily contradictory?
No, there could be things we can't conceive of that don't entail a contradiction that could be hypothetically existent.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah, no, I'd agree with you on that. I think we see eye to eye on that, definitely. So then I would say to you that if I was to say that, let's just call this object, which is inconceivable and does not exist outside of our minds, X, right? So do you believe the same as X equals
That would be a
X
contradiction.
is
So
true?
it can't be inconceivable and only exist in our minds. It could be inconceivable.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Oh, what I'm saying, just to clarify, what I'm saying is that it is inconceivable, right? And it does not exist outside of our minds. That's what I said.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm saying that this thing, let's say we make a statement about this unintelligible, inconceivable object X, right?
Yeah.
And I say X equals X. Is this a true proposition?
No.
So it's not true that this object, which is inconceivable and non-existent, is self-identical.
Right, it doesn't exist. So it would be like, imagine a unicorn that had some property that we couldn't conceive of. The unicorn X, the X-corn, it's the X-corn, and we can't imagine it. Is it true that an X-corn exists? No. No. Now you could say that semantically, given our laws of language, that the X-corn is an X-corn. But is it true that it corresponds to reality that an X-corn exists? No. And so there's two different usages of the term true there. One is true given our current laws of logic or current laws of language. So like, is it true that pawn e4 is a legal move? Given our laws of chess, yes.
Yeah.
Given reality, no. There's no truth value to that statement. So the same thing applies to the X-corn. The X-corn being itself is the same as is pawn e4 a legal move. Those statements are only true given the context of our language. There is no correspondence to reality. So if you're asking, are they really true? The answer is no. There's no absolute truth there, and they'd be no more true than the universe.
Okay, and I think like we're seeing, I think like you definitely understand the purpose of the question.
Or many theists try to define a God into existence, or at least the arguments that we get. And what we're really trying to understand is there a God in reality?
So I was going to say that, yeah, I think we're seeing eye to eye on this. I think like what you're doing, and this is where we agree with, there are like two different types of facts. You have the analytic facts and the synthetic facts. The synthetic facts are things which are true in virtue of some correspondence relation to the external world. And the analytic facts are things which are true in virtue of our concepts. But just another question real quick. Do you believe the statement x equals x is true in virtue of language or true in virtue of concepts, which is kind of different from language?
As long as reality operates in a way that is correspondent to standard logic, then it would be true in reference to reality. If reality does not operate in a standard logic way, then it would just be true in virtue of our concepts.
Yeah, okay. True in virtue of concepts. Okay, cool. And let's see which other question do I have. So yeah, so that was just a basically trivial question. Like you agree that there's different types of truths. Really, it depends on how you're analyzing truth given this particular conversational context. But another question would be, do you believe that it is possible for there to be an infinite regress of let's say composite objects?
Yes, there's no logical contradiction there, so therefore it is possible.
Do you believe that every composite object relies upon the parts for its own existence, like essential features of its own
I
existence?
don't know what that means.
Oh, you want me to clarify or what? I didn't hear you.
So like there can be a composite that could be made of something like a brain, and then the cells die and are replaced or whatever. And so the composite is contingent on the parts, but the parts can change. So the parts don't necessarily need to be there the entire time for the brain to be there.
Mm-hmm. What if the parts were to cease to exist? Would the composite exist? Like the brain, for example.
It's possible. There's no logical contradiction there.
What do you think makes the brain the brain?
So like in the context of this conversation, the conscious experience.
Conscious experience? So would you consider the conscious experience to be a part of what makes the brain the brain?
In the context of why I brought up the brain, it was for conscious experience. Yes. So in that sense, what makes me is my conscious experience. And right now, my conscious experience is made of the brain, which is made of cells. But if all the cells and brain disappeared, could my conscious experience exist independently of those? Yes, it is logically possible.
And a brain is something that holds both conscious experiences and non-conscious experiences like our heart. But I still want to get an answer from you, Apollo. Do you believe that a God is more like a definition, or do you believe that this God exists in reality?
I believe God exists in reality, but I'd like to go back to the talk I was having a T-jump about the brain thing, because I think this is an interesting talk.
But
yeah, definitely.
But I will say, if a host does ask you a question, please try to address that question.
Oh, yeah, I addressed the question definitely by saying I believe that God exists in reality. That's for sure. But yeah, T-jump, back to what we were talking about. Oh yeah, you were saying that you believe that if the parts of the brain did not exist, it is still logically possible for the brain to exist. Like you could perhaps like replace the brain or something. They're not like irreplaceable, correct?
Yeah, it could be like turn into a platonic object or something.
I think you made two interesting points, right? And I'd like to talk about the first point, which is your idea of personal identity. Like, let's say, for example, one was to have like a technological device which allows me and you to have the same exact conscious experiences. Do you believe that would be the same exact being or person?
As long as it shared all the same background information, like your subconscious information, what you had access to, then yes.
Okay. So another question would just be that obviously you consider all the collective of the conscious experiences, like for example the quality, for instance, and other sensory experiences to be something which in fact are necessary. They're necessary features of the brain, right?
No, brains die.
Well, you said a while ago that the brain are the conscious experiences. That's what you defined it as in this conversation. So I was just taking it at face value and then reapplying it to this specific part of the discourse.
Yeah, I was just using brain to refer to the self there, so it wasn't specifically about the brain.
So if the self, so you use brain to refer to conscious experiences or a set of conscious experiences, right?
I would say that qualia is required for the self or something like that.
Self depends on quality, right? Yeah. Okay, so if the self depends on quality, and the quality would be a necessary feature of the self in such a way where You could say the self is the bigger whole, and the qualia is one of the necessary features of this bigger whole.
Well, no, I'd
Would
say
you
they're
think that the
synonymous.
self
I'd
could
say it's just,
exist logically?
I'd just say the self is defined as the qualia, and then you can add other stuff to it, but self is just defined as the qualia. So it's just a definition. There's no like parts relation.
Okay, so so you believe that the self is identical to the qualia.
Yep.
I misinterpreted the idea that you're referencing, but let's see. So is there anything in the universe where you believe that it is a composite object and it has more than one parts which are essential for its own existence?
No, every emergent property can be a result of different parts or different substances. There's no necessary correlation between any parts and the whole that it makes up.
So do you think let's look at the human body, for example, our biological species.
Yeah.
Do you believe the bodies for biological species can exist, like the body itself can exist independently of all the physical particles which constitutes the biological species itself?
Yes, you could have a non-physical realm of spirit goo, and the body could be made of the spirit goo.
Wait, pardon. Do you think bodies are physical or non-physical?
Physical.
So wait a second. So if bodies are physical, based on the concept of what the body is, how is it going to be possible for a body to be non-physical? That would be a contradiction.
Because it's not necessary. It's contingent that our definition of bodies are defined as physical, because that's just what we have. We could absolutely discover there is a non-physical realm and bodies could be replicated there, in which case we would expand the definition of body, because it is not a necessary condition that bodies are physical. It is a contingent definition based off of our current experience.
Do you believe that a bachelor can be a married man?
No, because we simply define them as not the same thing.
I agree that given our concepts and definition of a bachelor, it is logically impossible for a bachelor to be an unmarried man. So why not use the same logic for a body?
Because body is a thing in reality. It's not a definition we made up. So if we make up definitions, obviously we can say the opposite of that definition is not the same thing. But when correspondence to reality, all of our definitions are tentative based off of our current knowledge. And so we define a body as being physical simply because that's the only examples of bodies we have. If we discovered non-physical bodies, we would be happy to grant those as bodies as well. And so their definition of bodies is not definitional. There is no logical contradiction with them being non-physical. It's simply a tentative definition we use in science because it's all we know of, whereas the definition of a bachelor is something we literally made up the definition for. And so we can absolutely say there's a logical contradiction in the opposite of that definition because it's something we literally made up.
But Apollo, I just want to
You made
ask
two interesting
again,
points.
But I just want to ask
Sure.
again. You said that your God interacts within reality. Do they have any
Never said that.
physical form? What? Okay, your God exists.
I never said God I never even made a claim about
She
God
meant exists.
since our
never
conversation.
She meant exists. So God exists in reality. That's what you said.
Yeah, and I gave you two options last time, which were that are you trying to define them? Do they exist just within a language, or do they exist in reality? What was your answer?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Well, here we go. Well, I'll give you another chance to answer. Does your God exist only in language, or do they exist in reality?
Wait. You're talking about this question because I've already answered the question, and I'm pretty certain T-Jump can attest to that. My answer was God exists in reality, and then I continued the conversation with T-Jump about the brain particles. So I did in fact answer.
It's like you remember.
So
Okay.
she literally just asked you the question, and you answered, I don't remember what my answer was. And then so she just re-asked you the question.
Yes, and then I clarified that I did. If you're talking about this question,
Gotcha.
right? Because I wasn't even listening to her, to be honest. Like I was really interested in respond to your points, but she interrupted. And then when she asked the question again, I'm like, wait a second. If you're talking about this question, I've already answered the question, right?
Well, that's a little narcissistic, but you do you.
Narcissistic? How dare you? What are you? No, I'm not narcissistic.
No. Amy's question was perfectly rational. She asked you a question. You said you don't remember. She repeated the question.
I'm not saying the question is irrational.
No. That part. So she asked you a question, and you said you didn't remember. Therefore, she re-asked the question. Perfectly rational. And then you went off of this like angry, ranty tangent about, no, I already answered this question. But the reason she re-asked it was because you said you didn't remember. So the one at fault there was you for saying you didn't remember because you weren't paying attention, and then she justifiably re-asked the question. That made perfect sense. So the one
I think you forgot one detail.
What was that?
Before she asked the question, T-Jump, she actually said that she implied that I dodged the question and never responded to it. So that's a recollection error on her part, because I did in fact respond to the question before we went on to the
So
topic
that
of
was
brain particles.
she said that in response to when she
Yeah.
asked before, like she tried to ask the question before, and you dodged the question by ignoring her and wanted to.
No. I explicitly responded by saying God exists in reality.
So that was the second time she asked. The first time she asked
Oh,
was
okay.
10 minutes prior to that, and you said you just wanted to talk with
Mhm.
me. And so that was the part where she said you dodged
Oh,
the
okay.
question. So that was in reference to something previous to.
But why would she be lamenting on that past when I've already answered the question, technically speaking, after that time?
So when she said you dodged the question, she was in reference to the very first time she asked, where you ignored her and kept talking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but let's not lament on this too much. But you made two interesting points regarding the definitions thing. My personal view on this is that I don't believe definitions are necessarily based on our current knowledge. I think you can have definitions independently of knowledge of reality. Like, for example, the definition of a unicorn that is not based on an actual experience of a unicorn in reality or any knowledge of such. It is based on our concepts, which are imaginary in nature,
Right, we made it
right?
up.
And we use these concepts to basically articulate the definition. Yeah. And the second point you made regarding, I think it was like how scientists define body and so on, how they come to the definition of body. I think what scientists do, like obviously they have these experiences of what makes this thing, like what makes this thing a specific biological species, and then what they do after that is just basically assign a definiendum or a specific word to this set of descriptions, right? So this definiendum or word would be a body. So a body would be this specific thing with X and Y physical attributes, for example, right? That's just how I deem this whole process of linguistics to be. But to really wrap this up, though, in a nutshell, I think that's the point you made, the overarching points you made regarding what's called the contradiction stuff, right? I was basically trying to say that in relation to the definition of a bachelor, it would be contradictory to say a bachelor can be a married man. So likewise, right, in relation to the definition of a body, it would be contradictory for a body to be non-physical, unless you're talking about an entirely different concept.
That would be false. So in science, nobody defines a body as necessarily physical. There is no definition in science that entails necessarily this is the case. All definitions are tentative. The body is simply this is how we understand bodies to be. Could there be more bodies that we don't know of? And the answer is yes. Every scientist, yes. Could there be a married bachelor? Well, no, because of the way we define the words. Could we change the definition of the words? Absolutely. And so there is no more truth objectively to the sentence bachelors are married and bachelors are not married, because they're definitions we made up. Bodies are not. Bodies are meant, the definition of bodies is meant to correspond to reality, a thing in reality. And what is it that constitutes that thing in reality? A body is usually like a vessel for some other mechanism like consciousness or hearts or cells, cell body. And so if there could be a constituent mechanism that holds something else in a supernatural goo sense, then that would be equally as much a body, and we would be happy to grant that in science, because we don't define them necessarily as anything. We define them based on their function. I think you mentioned that, like it does something.
I agree with you in some part. I agree with you that language is polysemantic. We don't have a specific necessary definition for a specific word. But I would say that the average person, right, the concept would have of a body in contrast to the soul is that which is physical, and the soul is that which is non-physical. Even people who do not believe in souls, by the way, would have this concept of a body in contrast to its souls. But the question I'd like to ask you is simply that, do you believe or do you agree that scientists would make the affirmation that all bodies, as we know it, are predicated on atomic particles?
Mostly, but no. So two things there. One is none of them would agree that it's necessarily the case that a body is physical. All would disagree there. 100%. It's not necessarily the case the body is physical. They would all disagree with that. Second, would they agree that all known bodies are physical? Mostly. There's a couple exceptions like virtual particles, but mostly yes. Thirdly, you mentioned about how most people would understand there's a distinction between a body and soul. Most people are idiots. It is not relevant. They understand that from their personal experiences, bodies are physical, and from their fifis, souls are not physical. And so they categorize them separately. And most theists misunderstand the fact that there is no logical contradiction with a supernatural space-time or a supernatural matter or a supernatural material world. So there can be non-physical things like space and time, non-physical matter. There's no contradiction there, but theists make this assumption that the physical world is not special and the supernatural world is special, and so we can't bring over the non-special stuff into my special Sky Daddy realm because that would be bad. But there isn't a logical contradiction with any of that.
You articulate those points really funny, I'm not going to lie. But I was going to say, to address the last point you made, or the recent point, I don't think the intellectual faculties of the average layman really matters to me. I'm just talking about the general concepts we have and whether it would follow from these concepts that it is possible, or it would follow from these concepts that this other thing that we're talking about is contradictory. But I do in fact see the point you're talking about. As you say, there's no scientist who specifically makes the claim that bodies are necessarily physical. I mean, that's open to research. I may actually check up on this to see if it is actually true or not sure. But I would ask you this question, though, which is, do you believe that atoms, right, based on what we know, they're physical?
Based on what we know, yes. Are they necessarily physical? No.
And atoms are defined to be the smallest particle or thing or was defined at least.
Was
to be the
defined in the 1700s as being the smallest thing.
Yeah. So do you think the smallest thing in the universe is a physical thing?
It was sort of.
Okay, so do you believe that it is possible for a physical thing to be composed of a non-physical thing?
It's logically possible, sure.
Okay, so when you say a physical thing could be composed by a non-physical thing, how are you interpreting this question? What's your concept of what I'm saying right now? How you understand it?
So I would say it's logically possible that there's some kind of like virtual mathematical state that interacts in some way in order to produce physical objects as an emergent property or something. So like virtual quantum foam fields or something. They're non-physical and they could potentially create physical objects. I like to think they're physical, but it is logically possible they are non-physical and purely information-based, and that information can cause an emergent property of matter.
Oh, interesting. So you basically deny the mind-body interaction problem, correct?
No. I mean, like,
okay,
I wouldn't say
I don't.
So actually, yes, sort of, yes.
Do you believe in causal closure?
I don't think that I don't think there would necessarily be a problem with a non-physical entity interacting with the physical state. So I wouldn't say, even if the brain was non-physical, I'd say the interaction problem would be epistemic, not ontological, in the fact that we wouldn't know how to explain how a non-physical being could interact with a physical brain. But I wouldn't say there was an ontological problem with it. No.
Do you think that, like, so when you're both talking about non-physical things, because I have to make sure we're on the same page, you're talking about something which exists outside space-time?
Yes. So space and time are emergent properties, but I'd say physical things can also exist outside of space-time. That's the consensus in physics. So most physicists think space and time are emergent. So nobody defines space and time as the definition of what's physical.
Yeah. So just to be clear, another thing is just to say that, do you believe that causality is temporal or atemporal?
Atemporal. Causality is most likely also emergent from something else, but it's definitely outside of space-time.
Okay. Okay, cool. So that would mean that under this specific view, which I also hold, by the way, which is very interesting because a lot of atheists, that's a very good view that you have. A lot of atheists are ignorant, so they basically agree with causal closure and they don't want to say that there's a possibility of atemporal causation, which is pretty interesting on your end. So yeah, we both agree that atemporal causation is possible, right? You can have atemporal causation.
Sure.
And it is not dependent upon space-time relations. So yes, that would effectively debunk the mind-body interaction problem. So yeah, you believe that non-physical things can interact with physical things. That's pretty good. Now, I guess what's going to stem from here is simply that, do you believe that just in the nature of a conditioned reality or composite objects, do you believe that for that composite object to be a composite object, it has to have the parts for it to exist?
For it to be defined as a composite object, it has to have parts, but the object can exist as a composite object, lose the parts, and then no longer be a composite object, but still be an object that exists.
Yeah, but the object that exists would be a different object, so it no longer exists, correct?
No, so it could be the same object, just made of something different. So like there's a composite object of, say, my consciousness, and then all the parts go away, but
Premise one, if the atheistic worldview conceptually entails at least one...
Stop.
Would you like not interrupt him, please?
Yes.
You were still speaking.
So if my consciousness exists as a composite object made of neurons, and if the neurons disappear, but somehow my consciousness exists as some kind of Platonic object or soul thing or whatever, even though it was a composite object at one time and it is now no longer a composite object, there's no logical contradiction saying it is the same thing, which is me, myself, my conscious experience.
Yeah, that is just to say that you can have replaceable accidental properties, right? And that's not something which is disagreeable.
So there would be no logical
You were
contradiction.
disagreeing with that?
No, I would agree with that. So there's no logical
Oh.
contradiction with a thing that is a composite object losing its parts but still being the same thing in essence.
Losing all its parts or only the accidental parts? Because I believe that if it loses its essence, it's going to obviously not exist, right?
So all of its parts except one. So it is a single thing, a single essence.
Wait, so you believe the essence does not have parts?
Well, that's just the minimum amount it can potentially have while still being the same object is one.
Okay, so the minimum amount that it has for it to maintain its status of identity, right? Is this minimum amount something which bears multiplicity or something which is simple?
Either one is possible. One is just the minimum amount. So if it has 0, it doesn't exist.
Okay.
If it's 1, it exists. And so one is just the minimum requirement.
Okay, so do you believe that it is logically possible for there to be more than one simple things in reality?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get this clear. So you'd agree that these simple things would differ from each other, right?
Yep.
So if they differ from each other, there's a differentiating property plus the property which makes it itself. That would be that it has more than one identity or properties.
Sort of.
Yeah, so that means it's not simple.
No, in that case there would be three perfectly simple objects. Two would be the two objects, and one would be the differentiating field, or essentially. So all three of those would be necessary objects, and so in this universe there would be three necessary objects: the two beings and the field of differentiation, or whatever. I had this conversation with Rob Koons, and he agrees. He's a Thomist expert, one of the world's leading experts in Thomism. Yes, you can have multiple necessary beings that all exist, and there is no contradiction there, and they're all perfectly simple.
So wait a second. So you basically, when you gave the argument or the line of reasoning for why it is possible for there to be three objects which are perfectly simple, by the way, you seem to have listed properties which contradicts it being simple, like three properties, just to not strawman or anything.
No. So
clarify your point.
There is two objects that exist, and there is some differentiating property, and the differentiating property is just another necessary being. So all three are necessary beings, and they exist with some differentiating factor, which is the property. And so that is perfectly fine to have three necessary beings that are perfectly simple in this universe, because the simplest you can get is the combination of these three different things.
Okay, so hold on there a second. So you started off by saying there's a differentiating property between two simple beings, and that is a necessary being. That's another necessary being. That's making it three necessary beings. So are these three necessary beings all identical or non-identical? And if so, what's the differentiating property amongst these three necessary beings?
The differentiating property is one of the necessary beings. So one of the necessary beings is the scale or the field that whatever this property is the spectrum of this property. And so that field is a necessary being, and the two other things, whatever other entailments they have, are going to be two different necessary beings that exist on this spectrum, which is a third necessary being.
So hold on there. So I take it to be the case that the differentiating property, right, of something, like what makes something different from something else, is generally speaking something which is a part of that thing's existence or nature. So for example, if I say that a rock is, or let's say water is different from, like, let's say a rock, right? You could
No. So it'd be like so it'd be like in space. Like if there's an object in location X and an object in location Y, neither of that is a part of the essence of the object. It doesn't make a difference. But you need space. So there has to be a necessary object of space. And you have these two other necessary beings that are one's located in position X, one's located in position Y. Neither of those, its location, are a part of its essence. That doesn't matter. And so there's three necessary beings here. One is the space, and two is the two different other necessary beings in other locations in space, which is a differentiating factor to know they are not the same thing.
Wait a second. Do you agree with Leibnizian law of identity?
Yes. So anything that shares all the same properties is the same thing.
Yeah. So that which is true of, like, for A and B to be identical, all things which are true of A, all the true propositions of A has to be true of B. Right. If we grant the Leibnizian law of identity, then if we have two objects in space, respectively X and Y, the they're engaging in different spatial locations or relations, right?
Right, that's the point.
Then if it is true of so that would mean that they're necessarily not identical also in virtue of their spatial locations.
That's how you know they're not the same thing. That's the point. That's why there's 3 different necessary beings, because they're not identical. And you know they're not identical because I placed them in different places in space, therefore they can't be identical.
But again, do you notice
Can you hear
these
me?
necessary arguments? They never answer questions. They almost get angry at the concept of answering questions.
I'm not getting angry. Why are you projecting? But anyways, T-jump. I was going to ask you, how is that another? How is that another
You
part of
never get
existence if it
answers.
doesn't
Good.
if it grounds that
So
affinity?
it exists within reality. Can I ask, is it physical? Does God have any physical elements?
Well, actually, let me answer his question, and then I'm going to get some food and let Amy take over. So your question was, what about these 3 objects? Something.
No, I was asking a different question a while ago. Just to be clear, I was just going to say that my question was simply that if it is the case that we both agree that its spatial location is one of the things that defining things which distinguishes these things from each other, make them non-identical. How is that not a part of their essence?
I don't understand the question. So, like, there could be things.
You said
in
a while
multiple,
ago that spatial locations.
It's just one of the potential ways. It's one of the potential ways to establish a differentiating factor. It's possible that you can eliminate it and say that there's one electron that goes through all space and time. That's one of the hypotheses, in which case it wouldn't be a differentiating factor. But it was just an example I used that's the most simple to show that there is a differentiating factor between these 2 other necessary objects, to show that it's possible to have multiple necessary objects. It wasn't a necessary condition. It's just necessary in this example because time and space are necessary beings. And so in this example, space is a necessary distinguishing factor between things because space is one of the necessary beings. It is not to say that all spatial separations are the necessary essence distinctions. That is not the case. It is possible that there is a single electron that does the work of all the other electrons in our universe, but in this hypothetical universe I'm positing with 3 necessary beings, space is a necessary being, in which case spatial separations would be something that would include an essence distinction between these 2 objects.
So the thing is that I don't really believe that.
I will let you take over.
Are you going to get some food? Yep. Okay, that's cool. Okay, got you.
And in a second, we're probably going to bring what's his name on, but I do want to ask about. He might have left actually. But Apollo, is this entity physical? You said they exist in reality, so are they physical?
I don't believe it is physical.
Can they do anything?
Yeah, it's logically possible.
What can they do?
Create a universe.
And that's it? They're just there to create the universe, and then
they can actualize all logical possibilities, or it can actualize all logical possibilities.
So this is a deistic concept, not a theistic one?
Yeah, I don't believe that Allah is conscious, just like Ibn Sina. You can have you can be like a theist and not believe that God is conscious. That's fine, but he's omnipotent.
Well, no.
Then why
if you're
call
a theist,
it a
you're
God?
claiming that he interacts by definition to differentiate.
Yeah, you can. Yes, you can have a being which is not conscious, which interacts with the universe.
But why call that God? Why not just say
because
you believe in a
it's the most powerful thing in the universe? Yeah.
Wait, if he's not conscious, how can he create the universe?
Because it is logically possible for a being without consciousness to create the universe.
But it's not created.
So your
What's
bar...
the logical contradiction with a non-conscious being creating the universe? Give me the contradiction.
Well, seemingly you would have to make a decision, like let's say at T1.
Why do you have to make a decision?
Because at T1, it's possible. Okay, so let me just go through it like this. Okay,
it could be within this dispositional nature.
If your modality, right? Like if your modality for what is actual is just what's logically possible, right? Then I don't know how to talk to you, right? So
that's a nice way to dodge the question. So I asked you for the contradiction with a non-conscious being and unconscious being, right? To be without consciousness to create a universe, and you went on the modality tangent, right? So instead of you saying that a being has to wait, let me just finish this part real quick. This is the most important. This is the most important part. I promise you, it's the most important part. Okay, I'm almost done. Right? If you're gonna say that for a being to create the universe, it ought to make a decision. For one, I disagree with this. I believe that a being can create something not in virtue of some conscious decision, but in virtue of some dispositional properties. So something within its nature which gives it the disposition to create something. So that's
Right.
just
So
outrightly
why would
wrong.
it create at time at T2 as opposed to T1, right? If it
Wait
has
a
a
second. So
disposition
this is
to
a different
create.
tangent. Is it
Sorry,
possible or
it's
is it
not a
not
different
possible?
tangent. Listen, if it's in its disposition to create, right, then what distinguishes why it creates at T2 as opposed to T1?
Asking for the distinction or the explanation which distinguishes it from creating a y time x from time y is not responding to the claim that I'm making, because I'm affirming that it is logically possible for there to be a being which is not conscious, which creates the universe. And you're denying this possibility, and you asking this question right now is not pointing to me to any contradiction, any logical contradiction in an unconscious being creating the universe.
But the reason that's an equivocation is because we normally use being.
Equivocation is amongst language, not in this case, but go for it.
Because we normally use being to mean this agent, but instead you are using being as just a being.
Have you ever heard
They
of
are
non-living
just
beings?
existing. Well, they're not beings anymore. That's the point. They can't
What do you think a
anything.
being is defined as?
A being
Wait, they can't. Wait, why are you
would be
assuming that
some-
because the being is not conscious, that means it cannot do anything?
Because we normally define beings as agents that are going around and doing something. So
So wait a second, you're an
God
atheist, right?
being, yes.
So you believe that there was an explosion which kicked off the universe, correct?
I believe that could be. It could be that the universe was always eternal, or it could be that there was some sort of meta universe that we are contained within.
What's your view on what's your view on the universe's creation?
Well, I would say that a universe, as we could tell, doesn't need a creator, because a creator would be coming from an agent. It would be something.
I'm going to point to the flaw within your logic, both of you guys'
Okay.
logic, okay? So I'm pretty certain that you atheists would both agree that human beings or human species or even biological species did not always exist. However, we do exist right now, right? But the reason or the explanation for our existence, under you guys' view, is not something with consciousness, but there's still a reason, correct? So that means the reason for something else's existence does not have to be some conscious decision, because under your view, the reason as to why human species exist is not a conscious being causing that thing to exist, or some conscious decision which makes it exist.
Sure,
There
I'm
you go.
going to agree with you and say because
cool.
it doesn't seem that a conscious being can do anything like create a universe, we can make the claim a God does not exist.
And we also
wait a second. So wait a second. That's just switching the claims, right? Because you guys are trying to imply that there's a logical contradiction in a conscious being, or sorry, a non-conscious being creating the universe, right? But now you're saying that, well, under an inductive view, it's just less probable. That's
It would
just
make
switching
no
the claim
sense.
dishonestly.
It may be possible, but it would not make any sense because all of the natural laws seem to come from non-conscious things. Lightning and thunder and water. All of these things don't come from gods that create it. It comes from a what, not a whom. I'm sorry, Walk. I will hand it over to you in a second, too.
But he was trying to question the modality of the action, right?
Labeled with a term that we don't use because we don't see the creation as is described in theology. We see change of form and change of state, not creative. So you could also say that nothing in the universe has ever been created.
Well,
I don't see how this answers anything.
I think we could define.
Well, there's no creator. There's no creation.
There are creations.
Nothing you said proves there's no creator.
There's no creation. Why would there need to be a creator?
Wait a second. What do you think creation means?
I know how I mean it. It means a will of volition by a being.
Do you think a creator requires consciousness? If you look at the scholastic definition right now, it says a person or thing which creates something. It doesn't have to be a person. What are you talking about? A creator does not have to be a person.
But
You
what
need to
would
do
it
some
be
research.
then if it's not a person? Because I would say that there are creations, they come from only one specific branch of life, and that is animals that we know of. We know that beavers make dams, and we know that we make spaceships.
Well, okay.
So this answers anything I'm
to
saying,
follow,
right? Because he was asking how can a being without consciousness create the universe? I answered the question by saying it is logically possible. Then he tried to question the credibility of that statement, to which now you guys are conceding to the idea that it is logically possible. So there you
Because
go.
just saying it's logically possible doesn't mean that it's likely. When all of the evidence points in the
You
opposite
didn't ask me for
direction,
likelihood. You
it
asked me for whether
doesn't
it can do
matter.
it. That's a possibility question.
But this is what presuppositionalists tend to do. They
I'm not
tend
a
to talk
presuppositionalist.
about.
I think presuppositionalism is garbage.
Waiting your turn like an adult.
And I will say, you were doing cosmological necessary being arguments. So I mean,
No, not a
it's not like
cosmological argument. It's a physical theological argument. You have physical theological argument, ontological argument, cosmological arguments.
So it's still a cosmological argument. It's higher
No,
under
cosmological
cosmological.
argument
It's
grounds
actually
the
a
argument with
type.
the cosmological facts.
He's a Thomist.
I'm not grounded in any cosmological facts. No.
Thomism is slightly different than presup. But you have been going for a while. We should let some other people have a chance.
Oh, okay, cool.
Well,
You want like someone else to ask you questions, T-Jump, or something? Like
Yeah,
your choice.
like maybe not the right person is new. Monoichi is new. Penguins is
Okay.
new.
It was a good talk, by the way, guys. I'll talk to you later, T-Jump.
Yep. See ya. Maybe orange guy. What do you got for us? Can you guys hear him talking?
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna wait for somebody else to talk.
Well, did you have a question or something? You raised your hand.
Yeah, but I'll wait, like, because other people were here before, so I'll just wait for them.
Okay. I think it was just penguins.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I had a question. So last time we talked, you said that morality is just whatever causes feelings of like yuckiness or goodness or like yay.
And whatever the cause of moral feelings is whatever is the essence of morality.
Yeah. What do you know if there are like sources from like moral philosophers that define it that way? Because I couldn't find any sort of philosophy sources that define it like that.
I'd have to look. Not interested.
Wait, but why would you think that morality is like that?
Because I'm not a dumbass. So like morality is a phenomenon. Our feelings of things. You have to be an idiot not to understand this. Like every philosopher would agree with this. Everyone in the field agrees with this. If you don't, you're just a dumbass. So morality is a phenomenon. We have moral intuitions. We see someone punch a baby. We feel that's wrong. That's morality. If it's a product of just evolution, then morality is just evolution. Do you have an actual question?
The feeling is morality?
Yes, all moral language throughout all of history, why everyone who's ever used the word has all referred to a phenomenon, which is a feeling we get when people do bad stuff. That's it.
No,
yes,
that's just not true at all.
Literally, factually the case in all of the history of all morality.
I mean, wait, so okay, that contradicts. Look, you said that whatever causes the feeling is morality. Now you're saying the feeling is morality?
No,
like,
this, again,
it's
you
either
have
what
to be an
causes...
idiot to not understand this. There is a phenomenon. We have feelings. The stuff is bad. We made up words to describe these feelings. Those words are morality, immorality, good and bad. So everything to which the word morality refers is caused by feelings. Now, whatever causes those feelings is the essence of morality. Maybe it's evolution, in which case it's just subjective. Maybe it's a law of physics. Maybe it's a God. Whatever is the cause of these feelings is the essence of morality, and dependent on what the cause is, determines whether or not it's objective or subjective or hypothetical or categorical. And so this is very, very easy to understand. All language of morality stems from a feeling that we get when we see bad things. And then whatever is the essence of that feeling, whatever causes that feeling, is the essence of what morality is.
Are you an emotivist?
No, this is just a hypothetical example. Like, so if our feelings are caused by society or evolution, then emotivism would be true. I think it's caused by like a law of physics, so I'm a moral realist. If it was caused by a God, it would be a divine command theorist. So whatever happens to be the source of all of these feelings is the source of objective morality. or whatever morality is.
No, look, I'm
Okay,
just talking about the truth conditions. Sorry to interrupt. Why is this?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, Penguin, sorry. So, it just seems to me that, like, well, let's just talk about, like, the truth conditions for moral propositions, right? So, like, are you saying that moral propositions have objective truth conditions, or are you saying that moral propositions are emotivist expressions and don't have
Neither.
objective truth conditions?
In the
Okay,
context of this
okay, I'll shut up.
conversation, I've made no statements about whether or not it's objective or subjective. The point is just we made a language of moral and immoral. The origin of the usage of those words all stems from a feeling, which is our moral intuitions. We see someone punch a baby, we get a feeling that's bad. We made a word for that. That's morality. Now we have the question: is that feeling objective or subjective? That's not answered by this question. This question is just simply saying, whatever the word morality refers to, it refers to an intuition we have. And the source of that intuition, whether it's like based on the truth value of a God, or if it's just subjective and moral, which doesn't have any kind of objective truth value, doesn't matter what the ontology of it is. Whatever morality is, ultimately it's based on those feelings. And our question of whether it's objective or subjective is whatever the source of those feelings is, the truth condition of those feelings, which is independent of the feelings. The feelings are not the morality, but our language of what morality and immorality is 100% derived from those feelings.
But I went to like my uni library and
I'm not
I went to
interested. I'm not
sources
interested.
to
This is
try to
true. If you don't
find
like it, I don't care. It's
like
not,
the
I have
academics.
no interest in discussing this. I've discussed this with professional philosophers. They agree. If you disagree, don't waste my time. Go bother them.
Which professional philosopher says this?
They've agreed with my definition when I talk with them on my channel. I don't
No,
remember.
which one?
I don't remember. You'd have to check which ones. I've had many conversations with moral realists.
Do you have look? Do
I'd
you
have
have
no
any
interest in
philosopher?
doing academic research or research. If you want, I can pay me. I'll find the answer. If not, I'm not going to do it.
Okay, so you have no source.
I have
Fine.
tons of sources, but I'm not going to do the work. Pay me or go away. This is the answer. Everyone in philosophy agrees on this. Yes, moral words correspond to the feelings we get. That's how they were invented. All of these words were invented based on these feelings we get. Congratulations. Basic knowledge in moral philosophy. If you want a source, pay me. I'll find it for you.
He also
No
has
shit.
he also has a video library where he's had these conversations. So I mean, you could just go look that up.
Sorry.
He also has a video library where he's had these conversations, so you could just
No, I've
familiarize
listened. Yeah, I mean, I've listened to some of them.
Apparently not enough, because this is not a first time this topic's come up.
Okay, do you know which philosopher defines morality as whatever causes moral feelings?
Okay, we're going to move on. If you don't have an actual question, you're done. If you want sources,
I had a question about
any sources, questions, you got to pay me or go away.
how much would it cost, right? If I wanted to pay for an answer, like
$75.
how do you account for the truth value of your $5? Truth value of your proposition.
$75, and I will do the research.
Oh, 75.
Yep.
All right. So, okay. So then, how do you account for the truth value of propositions, and then how do you feel? And does that feeling is that feeling real when either Witsit gets it, embarrasses you, or
I crushed Witsit.
or not?
Just look at the comments on every single video that's posted.
Also,
he gets
if you
the super
double the
chat.
money, he takes his shirt off. Just pointing out.
Also true.
What? So how do you account for that?
Account
truth
for
value, that they
what do you mean?
get all the
What do you mean
attention
account for the truth value? Like truth is that which corresponds
of
to
any
reality.
proposition?
Truth is that which
Of
corresponds
any
to reality.
How do you account for reality? Is what I'm asking.
I don't even know what that means. How do I account for reality?
Yeah. How do you determine what is real?
Differentiate imagination from reality through novel testable predictions.
That's how you account for it.
Again, account for reality is not a coherent sentence. How do I differentiate, or how do I show something is real? I have to use a methodology to differentiate imagination from reality, and the methodology I use is novel testable predictions.
Testable predictions in the reality that you experience. Okay. So you use your reality to affirm your reality.
No, I use novel testable predictions to be able to differentiate things in my imagination from things in reality.
Interesting. Do you imagine that that not Fox, as well as Austin Witsit, are on the losing end of the conversations, or is that reality?
Well, there's no like fact of the matter of who wins debates. That's not like a fact of reality. But I mean, I clearly won. Like, obviously, check the comments.
That's what I said. So the method that you would use is the comments, which would be other people to affirm the reality.
Well, that's how. Well, again, so there's no reality of who wins a debate. There's not like a truth value anywhere in the universe of who wins a debate. Debates are determined based off of essentially what makes the most sense to the audience, or what ideas most corresponds to what the audience can understand. And yeah, I definitely had better ideas that more corresponded to the evidence, to the science, to the audience. So in that context, yeah, I destroyed Wasted. And who not
But
Fox?
just
I
in
don't know who
terms
not
of
Fox.
science, just in terms of science, when it comes to what the shape of the Earth is and how old it is, there is someone who's right and someone who's wrong, and so it doesn't really matter on that. Yeah.
Can I make
Well,
a quick
I've heard
request?
this analogy as far as the age of the Earth before. Like I've heard this. I guess you could call it an excuse, right? You know, Amy just said, to determine who is wrong, we use geology, right? So I've heard this before stated, right? So Adam and Eve, right? So if Adam was created by God, right? A doctor would go up to Adam and they would check his pulse, they check his blood pressure, they check his tissue, and they say, yeah, this guy's 25 years old, right? But in reality, right, if that were the reality, he would have been made just 1 second ago. So how would geology prove the
Sure,
age of the Earth?
His telomeres wouldn't be that long.
and just to point out, that is why Adam and Eve is an example of a fairy tale. I'm not using that as the ad hom, but if you were to go into the logistics of any of these stories, they would never make sense.
Sorry, can I just make a really quick request to the room? Is it possible we could bring Roger up? If he's still around.
Does Roger have his hand up?
I thought he did.
I don't see him.
I know, he might have left. Fuck, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Roger. If you're out there, put your hands up and we'll bring you on board.
Is Roger?
I could check and see. I have a friend. Objects is real. He may be available. If you want me to check with him.
Hey, T-Jump.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So do you kind of subscribe to like do you think morality is objective, or like you
Yes.
like a moralist or something?
Yes.
You do. So why do you think that's the case? I just want to talk to you about that because I've seen many substances of moralism, and I'm not sure what stance to subscribe to.
Take a very, very deep breath.
Yeah. I just came back from a jog, so I'm a bit tired.
I like it best. I don't think there's any evidence, like hard evidence for it. I think it fits the hypothesis. I think that the patterns in morality that we see in humans will be correspondent to patterns in morality of all species everywhere in the universe, including AI, the things that don't devolve. And so I think that this pattern is probably going to be governed by something more than social constructs.
More than social constructs? What do you think that thing about social constructs would be?
Like a law of physics, something
Because-
fundamental in nature.
Something fundamental in nature, because I do think it's more so contingent upon the social construct, since right now my stance is cultural subjectivity or cultural subjectivist, and I do think that we're not born with these innate traits or inherent traits of like a certain moral compass. Because I have a question. You know how like conventional Americans kind of subscribe to like a sentimental value towards like dogs and cats, right?
Sure.
And you know, people in Japan don't really have the sentimental value. They don't have a stance on that. They're
They
absolutely
do. They are obsessed with cats, just so you know. But
but
I would agree that there are
they would
certain
eat dogs
things.
because they're not-
There are certain things like cats and dogs. Yeah, I don't think that has anything to do with morality. I'd fully agree. Our obsession with cats and dogs is cultural subjectivity.
Yeah, so then that's my own entire stance. So I don't think
I
that you
don't
can kind
think
of say
that
globally or
everything
universally
in
that-
morality is like cats and dogs. I think like there are certain things like murder, rape, etc., that would be universal to all species, independent of cats and dogs. And so I think that fundamentally all moral claims can be boiled down to one thing, which is like any involuntary imposition of will is immoral. And I think that principle will be every species conscious agent will move closer to that principle the more resources and more intelligent they have everywhere in the universe, independent of how they came about, whether it's biological or synthetic or AI. And so because I think that there's this one principle that all conscious agents will move towards, I think that whatever governs that principle is something outside of society or evolution.
Oh,
Okay.
hypothesis falsifiable.
No,
Wait,
again, I
guys.
already said, well, it's falsifiable, yes, but there's no evidence for it yet, as I have admitted.
So
What would falsify your view?
I have a question, by the way. So obviously external to like pets and animals, obviously there's a different level of intricacy and complex like ideas that we kind of subscribe to when we were talking about the animals. Obviously they're different from humans because obviously they don't have these common traits that humans do because we would think about them in a different way, right? You agree to that?
Sure.
Right. Okay, so I agree to that kind of like independent from our own thought process or process in which we can, how do I say this? Kind of like put them in a spectrum or hierarchy because obviously humans would be above animals in terms of how would we feel, how emotionally attached we are. So if that's the case, right? When you make this kind of grandiose claim saying that this thing kind of would follow intuitively or in the sense that this thing is, how do I say this? Because you did say that you think that there is something external to society or any societal
Yeah, which has
argument.
nothing to do with cats or dogs.
Yes, yeah. So I think fundamentally, I think that can be falsified as well because I've seen documents and reports or accounts of what's it called? I've seen documents and like accounts of people having their own moral compass, which is more so governed by
That wouldn't be a falsification. So like, some people are blind. Some people have 4 cones. They can see 4 colors. Is that a falsification that there is light? No. So the fact that some people
it's just
perceive
the idea
things.
that they can perceive this light.
What?
It's just the idea that they cannot see this light.
Right. So the
because
same
of,
thing would apply to people with morality. Some people won't be able to see or experience the moral law as accurately as other people, just like some people can't see as accurately as other people. That's not a falsification.
Then how can you make this claim or bold or sturdy claim making that?
Because the
Or not
pattern
making a claim.
across human society is the same. The fact that there are some
Yeah, but that pattern wouldn't actually follow from the initial premises since this thing is more so individual and it's not
No, that's
like a
wrong.
universal.
So this pattern
thing.
does follow. There's a pattern through all human culture of as we gain in technology and intelligence, we tend to see more involuntary impositions of will as immoral. So that's always the case. Are there a couple people who disagree? Always, but the trend is always the same. So just like with global warming, there is a trend path. Are there ups and downs on the trend path? Yes. Is the trend always the same? Yes.
Okay. Do you have like a side of reference for these trends? Because I'm not
Steven
really sure
Pinker's
about
The
that.
Better Angels of Our Nature. That's a good one. I think Ix had another one that I forgot the name of.
Yeah, Michael Shermer's. I think it's called The Moral Arc.
I'll search that up. Yeah, just give me the names and I'll see if I can research that.
They were.
Yeah, the
I just wanted
hardest thing is that subjectively, it feels that we are like in some of the worst times, although objectively we are in some of the best.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by objectively? Because I think that the state or the way that society kind of is evolving around right now, I think this would kind of entail it being like a really bad time.
Almost everything that we would normally define as a good society, that is the way that society is going around the world. Like crime is lowering, people are being employed. Almost everything that we look for, society is heading towards. So that's what I meant to say. That's why we were talking about Steven Pinker's Better Angels of Our Nature. If we look at the statistics, objectively, it is one of the best times in human history. If you asked yourself, what time period would you like to go to a vast majority of people, they would actually have like lock-offs. They'd be like, hey, I'd want to go past any time except for, this time period where I didn't have rights. And so, but subjectively, it feels shitty because we just have lives and we have our ups and our downs.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, that's from your own like kind of a subjective input or worldview. Obviously, I agree to that, but I think that when you kind of make this claim about this thing objectively being better, I don't know if that's the case at all. Since I do know that, like external to our tradition, like let's say, and like during the slavery time or the colonial times, that these people they make slaves, not make slaves, but they kind of bred slaves, and these slaves more so do these work, and they kind of make society run better in a sense, right? But
No.
obviously now we don't agree to that. That's not conventional at all. We don't
Sure, but
perceive that.
you are violating the bodily autonomy of many
Bodily
humans.
autonomy.
By
Yeah,
every
the
measurable,
society society is based on it gets violated by slavery.
Yeah, it's not just
so
a uterus in
by
that
every
place.
measurable
Everyone.
statistic that can be discovered and is valued by any model of morality, the current system we live in is better objectively than any other system. Now, you could make up your own bullshit values that are unmeasurable and unverifiable, but we don't care about that. All we care about is the measurable, verifiable ones. And by every metric that is measurable and verifiable, our current society today is better than every other society throughout all of history.
What T-Jump said.
Okay. In perspective of our society, yeah, I would agree to that, yeah. But that's really all I wanted to kind of have a discourse about shit, because I don't really know a lot of things. That's why I kind of like retain like an agnostic position on things regarding like culture and things like that. Not sure, so this really informed me. I appreciate that.
Yep.
I actually wanted to ask a bit of a question. I was just wondering, Tom, like you were kind of saying you accepted your view because you liked it. Do you think like you liking a view or it making it feel good is the reason to accept that view is true?
Yes, absolutely. That's literally how all scientific hypotheses are formed.
Okay, so are you like a pragmatist about truth?
No. So truth is independent of what you like it. But whether or not you like it is a great way to believe something. Like if it makes you happy, believe it as much as you want. That's totally irrelevant to truth.
Okay, so you agree that you just believe the view, but you don't have any reason to think it's true, is what you're saying?
I don't have any evidence for it. That was the second sentence I said after believe it because I like it.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, it sounds like kind of like, so like there's Maury's paradoxes where somebody will say like it's raining outside, but I don't believe it's raining outside. Like usually I take it that when people say they believe something, the reason they believe it is because they think it's true. It sounds like you don't.
No, I think it's
that you
true.
just
I think
believe
it's
it,
the
but you have
one.
no reason.
I think it's true because it is seems to explain all of the data. I make predictions about how this pattern of morality will be found through all species, including AIs. So I believe it's true. Yes. Do I have any empirical evidence for it? No. So is it justified in that sense? No. But I do believe it's true.
Okay, and you believe? I mean, so you can believe it's true if the reason you believe it's true is that it explains a lot of data. Well, you're going to have all sorts of other views that explain the data.
Yes, that's called the
So I
problem of
don't-
underdetermination. There are infinitely many things that all explain the data.
Okay. Yeah, so surely you can't say the reason you think it's true is because it explains the data, because that's something that applies to other views that you
Right.
don't.
The
believe
reason
are
I
true,
believe
right?
it is because I like it. So it explains the data.
Okay.
It explains the data and I like it. Therefore, I make predictions to try to confirm it. And if the predictions are discovered, that would be good evidence for believing it. But this is the
Gotcha.
same with every scientific view. A scientist makes up a hypothesis that explains the data, like Einstein made up general relativity to explain the data. He liked it, he accepted it, then he started to test for it. This is just how everything works. If you like it.
Now remember what we just agreed earlier, like whether or not like something is liked by someone has nothing to do with whether it's true.
Right, but I never said anything about truth there.
That.
So you can like something,
Okay.
and the reason you believe it is because you like it, just like Einstein liked general relativity because it explained the data. Is that like evidence? No, it is not evidence. Does that mean it's true? No, it is not. Then you do the next thing. You do the testing part after that. So first you have
I'm
the
so sorry to
hypothesis.
interrupt.
You like
We
it.
let Roger up.
Who's Roger? Yeah, we can get to him in a minute.
I guess maybe the issue I'm having, I know it seems like earlier, it seemed like if we agree that like the liking part, that's not anything that doesn't raise the likelihood of the view being true. And it seems like we also agree that the reason you accept the view is because you believe it's true. If I were to ask you why you think it's true,
the reason I
you can't
accept the
appeal
view,
to you liking it.
The reason I
because
accept
you
it,
liking it, as we just agreed, doesn't have anything to do with whether it's true.
The reason I accept it is because I like it, not because I think it's more likely to be true than not.
Okay, gotcha.
And because I like it, and I found patterns, and I infer things from those patterns, I believe it's more likely to be true based off of a guess. It's not actually. There's no evidence there. There's no evidence that it's more likely to be true. I already covered this. This was literally the second sentence I said. There is no evidence of this yet.
Okay, so you're saying you accept the view because you don't. The reason you accept the
Because I
view
like it.
has nothing to
It's 'cause
do
I
with
like
whether
it.
you think it's true.
Because I like it.
But you just think it's true because you like
Yeah,
it.
and I like it, and I look for patterns, and therefore I think it's true.
Okay, so but so you think it's true because you like it, but you also agree that somebody liking something has nothing to do with whether the view is true.
Right. That's again, I literally explain this. This is how every scientific hypothesis is formed. They like it. They think it's true. They look for evidence for it. Every view works this way. This is not surprising.
I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't even know where. How else? This is kind of funny, but like,
Well, why don't you
you
describe why you think it's a problem?
you yourself are saying that whether or not somebody likes the view has nothing to do with whether it's true. But then
We
you
cover
said
this next.
People really need to get in the habit of explaining why they think it's a problem instead of just scoffing over and over again. It's like, if you think there's an issue, state what the issue is.
Yeah, it's basically saying this is my hypothesis because we don't have an answer. This is the hypothesis I'm putting forward because I like it.
Yep.
Get what's so hard.
Rev, what do you got for us?
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, I had a question for you, Tom. Is it true that like your account of ethics is a descriptive account? Like there's no normativity going on there?
Depends how you define normativity. I can define normativity as descriptive just fine. But yeah, it's just descriptive. There's no oughts.
And you said like citing PhD philosophers would count as evidence for the positions you hold?
Sort of not.
Well, Alex Malpass, for example, is a moral realist. Moral realism is it's a position you hold.
I don't care.
So if he is a moral realist, he created an entire
Yes, I know. I had a conversation with
article.
him on my channel on this topic. I'm very familiar with Alex Malpass.
Yeah, so he's saying your theory isn't even moral realism at all.
That's
because it
great.
doesn't contain
Many
any
don't. So if you
physics.
go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, there are multiple different entries on things that don't include oughts. Whether he agrees or disagrees doesn't matter because there's no actual evidence on the topic.
But see, the thing is, when you say that, it seems like you're being an intellectual parasite, right? Would you concede that? You're just deferring to other philosophers to explain your view?
No, it
Intellectual
doesn't even make sense.
parasite.
Like you brought up, you
Knowledge
bringing up
is
an objection that some philosophers say they don't, that you need oughts for morality, and so I bring up an objection. Some philosophers don't say the exact opposite of that. So you're being an intellectual parasite, bringing up an objection from a philosopher, and I'm just using the same evidence you are to counter your evidence. None of what you said is relevant. None of what you said is relevant or an objection to anything in my model. It's just a waste of time.
Well, the point is that like you can't demonstrate the incoherency of the negation of your view just deferring to like
Yes, I
philosophers.
can
to
actually. So I
explain it.
literally have done this before in my conversation. Morality, in essence, all language of morality refers to a phenomenon, which is feelings we get when we see things like people punching babies. And so the essence of what makes something moral is whatever the cause of those feelings are. The essence of morality is the cause of those feelings. Therefore, if the cause of those feelings is something like evolution, there's no oughts in morality. If the cause of that is a law of physics, then you have an objective model of morality that with no oughts. So you can solve the problem with no inconsistencies whatsoever very easily, and just nobody who has a basic level of understanding sees a problem with this.
I guess like the issue is that like if you're giving a completely descriptive account of ethics, you're not providing anything action guiding. So the issue is just that
So action
you're
guiding
committed
is
to
not a
view-
requirement in morality anywhere in any definition of morality. It's just not relevant. You can use any model of morality that is descriptive and create hypothetical imperatives that are action guiding. So my model can provide action guiding means anyway, but again, it's just not relevant to morality.
I guess the issue is that you're committed to a view where you can't meaningfully distinguish the term right realist. So how should anyone take your view seriously? You've also said that because
so you can differentiate moral realist there. Realism is a statement that moral statements have truth value. If the truth value is dependent on some law of physics, then they have truth value. Moral realism solved. You're an idiot. Stop wasting my time. Next.
Wait, how are you rolling out error theory there?
Ruling out error theory. What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally when people defer to moral realism, it's just the conjunction of three theses, right? It's just going to be the first one that moral statements are truth at.
Yep.
The second one is going to be that at least one such statement is true.
Sure.
Which is rolling out error theory. Error theory would be accepting the first thesis, but just denying that any such statement could be truth-apt.
Right. So my model is that
And
there's a
then
law of
the
physics that.
third
Wait.
thesis
Stop.
would
Stop. Stop. Stop.
be.
Stop. 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 So
Go
mine
ahead.
was that
Go ahead.
there is an objective truth value because whatever morality is corresponds to a law of physics. So you can specifically say these actions do or do not correspond to that law of physics, and that would be true or false.
Right. I agree that you're saying that they're truth-apt.
And that there is a
But how
law
are
of
you
physics, which means there are propositions that do necessarily correspond to that law, which means one is at least true.
Wait, sorry, your justification for why at least one is true is what?
If there is a law of physics to which these statements correspond, then one of them must necessarily be true.
Okay, what's the argument that they correspond?
Okay, so the very first one is if a law of physics exists to which moral statements correspond, by definition, one of them corresponds to this law of physics.
I'm understanding the conditional. Right. I'm asking, do you have like a explanation or justification for the conditional?
What do you? I don't even know what you're saying. Like nothing you said is coherent.
The conditional. So, hold on. So, in regards to you saying that they do correspond to the laws of physics,
that's
right?
By definition. So, if there is a thing that exists to which these sentences correspond, then by definition they correspond.
Right. What's your definition then?
What definition of what?
Of
like
morality,
literally nothing you're saying. So there is a law of physics that causes this pattern of moral intuition and moral progress in all species everywhere in the world. So morality is governed by this law of physics. And there are some moral statements that accurately describe the pattern that this instantiates. And there are some that don't accurately describe the pattern this instantiates. Some are true, some are false. Problem solved.
Yeah, so what's an example of a truth at moral statement that is true?
Don't drown babies.
Okay, and why is that true?
Because it corresponds to the pattern that this moral law of physics instantiates in all agents everywhere in the universe.
And how does it correspond?
How does it correspond? So the law of physics causes patterns, and these patterns can be represented by words. And the words that accurately represent one of these patterns is drowning babies goes against the pattern, therefore it's wrong.
Right, that just sounded like a repetition of the claim. That didn't really...
Next.
Wait, did you say that philosophers who say that normativity is required for morality are idiots or something?
No. I think I said the idiots thing refers to the part where I said that moral language refers to our feelings of moral intuition, and that's the origin of all moral language or something. And then anybody who disagrees with that's an idiot, I think.
Yeah, but you said that like people who think that oughts are, built into morality are idiots.
Pretty sure I was in reference to the first one.
No, I'm not talking about today. I'm talking about you've said that in the past.
Maybe. I don't know.
Like, is that a view you still hold?
No, not necessarily. I wouldn't say that anyone who thinks oughts are entailed in morality or part of the definition of morality are idiots simply by virtue of that. No, because that's a perfectly fine position to hold.
Yeah, I mean, normativity is like baked into moral language and pretty much like all moral texts that I've read.
It's not.
I mean, like,
I don't care. Do you have any relevant questions?
Okay, so here's an excerpt from Russ Schaefer
I'm not
Landau's.
interested in sources. If you want sources, pay me. Next.
Wait, what? He was gonna read a source that he.
I have no interest in going through debate about academic sources. I've done this before. I've done this with professors. Doing it with people on Discord is a waste of my time. Next conversation. Anybody else? Questions, comments, philosophy, politics, God?
This is your chance, if you believe that a God exists, to tell us heathens why we are wrong.
I'm a spiritual, non-religious person, so I'm kind of like halfway in the middle. But everything had to come from somewhere and something, and whatever that something and somewhere is, that's God. We're enabled to
Where did that thing
define
come
what
from?
capable of conceptualizing it. But fundamentally, we have to know that to be true because something doesn't
Okay,
come
so
from
you
nothing.
the very first sentence you said is everything has to come from something or somewhere, and then whatever that thing is God. Okay, everything would include that thing. So where did that thing come from?
See, the issue is you're trying to contextualize and put something into words that's like us as human beings, we're incapable of understanding the depth of it, and I'm okay with it.
No, it's very easy.
Just something had to come. It was a beginning,
There's
right?
nothing
There's a
beyond
beginning of
human understanding here.
everything.
You can say not everything was created. Not everything needs to have been created. It's very easy to humanly express
No,
that
see, the
statement.
thing is I know that I don't know, and I'm incapable of actually knowing or contextualizing it. I just know that this didn't all come from fucking nothing.
I agree.
Like, see, there
Why
is
is
matter, and
nothing
it
an
does
option?
I
exist,
agree.
and we can
Why do you
bear the
consider
question.
nothing? Why do you consider nothing an option in the first place?
Huh?
So we agree.
Why are you
Nobody
assuming
thinks
nothing is ever an issue?
Nobody thinks something came from nothing except Christians. So I agree with you. Everything exists and it didn't come from nothing, which means there are two options. It was created from something else or it always existed. Now,
yeah,
I think physical reality has always existed. I don't think it was created. It seems like there's no reason to think it was created.
Well, there is a start of everything, right?
No.
And to try and think of that would bring you to a point where you're incapable of conceptualizing what actually happened. And as human beings, we will never be able to, and I'm okay with that. But that, to me, would signify at least, some sort of creator or being or whatever.
Well, no. So that's a contradiction. So if everything had a beginning, that would mean the creator had a beginning. So it's not everything had a beginning. In your analogy, not everything had a beginning, and there is something that had no beginning, which could be.
When I'm
physical
saying
world.
everything has a beginning, I'm not talking in relation to the creator because we cannot quantify, measure, look at. I'm talking about all physical matter around
Right.
us.
So you're arbitrarily saying all physical matter had a beginning based off of no evidence. You're just asserting this based off of nothing. So I can assert God had a beginning and was created by physical matter. Is there any evidence of this? No, it's just an assertion. It's the exact same thing as you're claiming. There is no reason to think all physical matter had a beginning. None. The Big Bang is the beginning of our space-time, not all space-time. So there is nothing.
I never said it was the beginning of all space-time.
That was not a reference to you. So there is no reason to think that all physical matter had a beginning. None. There is no evidence of that. Nothing indicates that. That is just a thing you kind of pulled out of your butt.
Well, maybe we're zooming in on the beginning a little bit too much. Physical matter exists nonetheless. Where did it come from?
It didn't. It's uncreated.
So it's uncreated.
Yes.
If I'm holding this matter in my hand, physically,
change of form, not creation.
Do you know anything about cosmology or physics? Like, if our current best theories are true, the thing that's the most fundamental are fields. All the things we're talking about are excitations of fields, and you're gonna have some strange intuitions if you're reasoning just about things as they appear rather than like the most fundamental physical theories we actually have.
X, you're getting very quiet, man.
Sorry, the mic was far away. So did you catch what I said so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So like quantum field theory, do you understand what that basically says?
It's not my area of expertise, but I have a very, very rudimentary understanding.
Okay. Suffice to say that like ancient cosmological arguments about the creator are a little out of date when we have actual cosmologists and physicists with actual models. So the question is underdetermined. We don't know which of the explanations is correct, but they have actual mathematics to them. They're not just like arbitrary, well, this must mean that type explanation, just so
See,
story.
like the
If we,
problem is, I think that like my position is, I know that I don't know, and I'm okay with that. And I know that we as human beings are incapable of really actually knowing. So
physicists are quite capable of understanding physical theories, and they're capable of generating predictions that are
but
hyper
there are
counter.
limitations, right? There are
Hold on,
limitations with that.
hold on. Look, like we're quite capable of having the smartest people in the world think about something long enough that we come to some counterintuitive conclusions. We don't know if they're sure or not, so we propose experiments. We take some time, we build big instruments. Sometimes they cost like hundreds of billions of dollars and are hundreds of miles long, and then we use those to try to do measurements to see if our model works. That's currently what physicists are doing, and just sort of throwing up our hands and saying, well, humans can't know things, whatever, is, I think, a tad disrespectful to people who actually are figuring things out, and maybe you should study what their conclusions are so far. There are unresolved questions, and those unresolved questions may be, some of them may forever be unresolved, but it's doing a disservice to say that like you have a belief about the origin of the universe when you haven't given any study to actual cosmology. One of the cosmology explanations is that there is something called a metastable false vacuum, which is a fancy way of saying that there's no such thing as what we call emptiness or nothingness. There's just what appears to be a state of constant flux in all space at all times, which gives rise to what we can observe, which is called virtual particles. And many cosmological models posit that that flux is part of the fundamental nature of the universe, and that all of the fields that we observe, including space and time, emerge automatically from the flux. It's like if you had
yeah,
a random
I
generator.
understand that to be true. Water here and water, how many miles away, or billions and billions of light years away, it's still H2O. The data is the fucking same. It comes from the fucking ether of the universe. I get this, right?
The point is that the concept of nothing may not turn out to be doing any work in cosmological explanations. Because if there's no such thing as nothing, if the thing we call vacuum, the most empty of all physical things, actually just constantly produces and destroys particles, and if the origin of the universe is explained by that fact, that in the earliest points that could be measured in time space, that flux caused a vacuum bubble to expand faster than the particles could annihilate, which gave rise to the universe and space and time as we know it. If that's the explanation, what part of we didn't come from nothing is relevant to that, right? There was never a nothing in that explanation.
So if I were to create a simulation in a video game, like there was no game that existed prior, but I code in all these ones and zeros and create these parameters in which in this video game you can calculate, you can theorize, you can figure out, data is the same over here as it is over there. There's this fundamental truths we can measure, but the fact that I created the video game, press enter, and made the video game go live, there was nothing before, and now there is something after, even if it's measurable, even if you're able to measure it, right?
So do you know
Even by
before
any way to quantify it.
Okay.
Right?
So
I could literally put this whole universe into a simulation, into a video game, and you can measure everything. But that doesn't stop there being nothing from before. This could be all a simulation that was created.
No, you made it out of something. You made the video game out of something, right? Something was there. There was like a computer or something.
The creator.
No.
The creator. The creator.
So did you just build it out of your arms? Did you just take a piece of your arm and just make it? No. So first law of thermodynamics: energy cannot be created or destroyed. Cannot be created. Was not created. So the cup in your hand that you're holding is a reorganization of stuff that was already there. Energy cannot be created. It was always there. It's an uncreated thing that was always there. Nobody created it.
Yeah, but hold on. I understand what you're saying. But if I were to create a video game in which the laws of thermodynamics are literally the same, that everything cannot be created or destroyed, and that's measurable on every level in this video game, but removed from this video game is the person that coded it and made it that way, right? So in my mind, it's like it can very well just be a simulation. Everything that you are measuring is just, a measurement of the video game
Yes,
that
and
has been
magical
created.
farting leprechauns could have farted out the universe 5 seconds ago, but there's no evidence of that, and no one believes that because it's stupid. Same with the
No,
creator.
see, my issue is when people try to quantify things that like are unquantifiable, right? When religion, for example, that's why I'm not a religious person, because religion tries to quantify what it actually is and is incapable of doing so, right? That's probably more so my position of like, how can you be a religious person?
So just taking board everything that T-Jump and said, but I feel like your understanding or your question is the questions that we don't know. Should we be putting labels on it? Should we be taking data that, at least from the religious point of view, they seem to be just making that data up? And the answer is no. I feel like I would love to just push you over to our side then, which is, a lot of us call ourselves agnostic atheists. That is, we don't believe in a God, or we don't know there is no God, but we don't believe in a God.
I've just seen so much evil in this world that good has to exist on the same equilibrium.
I mean, I think good does exist. I think we can go out there and do good. I just don't think there are
Bro, have you not
forces
met some women? I've met the devil in person, okay?
Why do you need a god for there to be good?
God isn't fucking necessarily good or evil, so that was a bad comment on my part. I know where you're going with that, and then I agree with it, because from a religious person standpoint, I would say God is like when they're arguing God is good, God is this, God is that. I'm like, no, God is everything from your perspective, if God exists.
Can I ask a question about the second law of thermodynamics? So, like, isn't it just a straightforward composition fallacy to say, like, within our universe, the second law of thermodynamics applies, therefore it applies to the whole the universe as a whole, right? Like, we don't know that it applies outside of our
That was the point of the
local
video
universe.
game I was trying to make, like within the
Yeah,
confines of the video
That's
game.
why I was trying to, yeah.
But can I also point out what I don't like about that experiment is that it has a whom at the back at it. And so if it is a simulation, then we are a creation. It is a form of intelligent design or creationism or whatever the hell they want. I have no reason to think that there was a whom at the other end. And that's my big beef with deism or theism,
Dude,
any of the
for me, the creation could be a cosmic fart in the wind, right? Like that could be what it is, right? I just am incapable. I'm not saying it's an intelligent being. I'm not saying that I'm just saying I'm incapable of quantifying that, and I could acknowledge it, and I would never try to quantify that, and I'm okay with that.
Well, so to go back to the point about the first law of thermodynamics, yes, it is possible that there are things outside of the universe where the laws don't apply. We just have no evidence for it. That's why I brought up the example of the farting leprechaun. It is possible a leprechaun farted out the universe 5 seconds ago. There's just no evidence for it. So the same thing applies to a god. It's more rational to believe the things we do have evidence for, like the laws of physics.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about, like, if you're saying something like it's impossible for God to create because of the first law of thermodynamics, right? No energy can ever be created or destroyed or whatever, right? That's just straightforwardly false.
Right. I'm not
because
saying
a
it's
composition.
impossible. I'm saying there's no evidence
Yeah,
for it.
well, I'm just pointing out that position is straightforwardly false because it's a composition fallacy.
Right, to say that God can't do something necessarily because the laws of physics necessarily can't be violated or something. Yes, it's clearly it would be a logical contradiction. But the claim is that there's no evidence, and you would have to violate something that has one and a significant amount of evidence in order to try to posit that. And in order to justify a claim that violates one of the most well-established principles in the universe, you would need more evidence than I imagine my Sky Daddy done it.
Yeah.
Well, so it depends what you consider evidence, right? Like, are arguments evidence?
No, I would need novel testable predictions, not I imagine my Sky Daddy done it in fancy words.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. And that's a problem with
Argument,
religious
argument,
people.
evidence is
Where religious people just try and go off the argument.
Yeah, it's okay to have a hypothesis. We just generally want you to go out there and do field work and then get it peer reviewed.
However, you
Like,
know, there
that's
is
just
something to be said about the utilitarian purpose of religion. So, you know, there is that one
It's just,
caveat.
there's nothing unique about that. Though.
It's
Well, I
replaceable.
mean, like, look at the degeneracy in the West, man. You got 80% fucking divorce rates. The family unit doesn't survive. You look at other fucking more religious cultures and shit, you know, that you're still holding on. So there is a good utilitarian purpose for the betterment of humanity. So, like,
And I think
I don't think being super intelligent on this is probably good for the betterment of society. People should probably be
Except you're
stupid and
not
believe in
actually taking
religion.
into
I think
account
it's
all of the factors
50%.
that was responsible for that particular thing.
But it's 50%, not 80%. And there may be, like I think Walker was also saying, is that there's many factors. I think that there's ways we could promote a healthy marriage without having to say that there's a guy watching you 24/7.
No, I agree with that. I think laws probably need to change around, like, you know, making the grass greener on the other side. If you divorce this person, you're going to get half his house, half his money, like, we need to reform those laws. You know, women work just as much as men do, so we need to, you know, no longer back in the fucking 30s when women stayed at home. So we need to change our laws to probably benefit that.
1970, you weren't allowed to get a divorce without your husband's permission until the 1970s. How far back do you think you have to go before you find
Yeah,
evidence?
well, it was probably
stupidity from
based back
religion?
then. You leave women to their. I know it's a diverging from the conversation, but you leave women to their own devices. Look what they've done in the West.
Yeah, amazing things. Once again, we were just talking objectively. This is some of the best time periods within history.
Are you kidding me? This is horrible.
Why? Can you name something horrible that's in your life? You go out screaming right now every day. You go out and you go, ah.
I go out every day watching the world deteriorate
Yes,
and more.
But like from like a specific like news channel. So so if you wanted your world to deteriorate, all you got to do is change either the news or don't watch that specific pipeline of news, and then the world won't be. Because that's all.
You could put horse blinders on, yeah, and pretend that all is fine and dandy while your currency is being debased at an unprecedented rate. Fucking, you know, you could put your head in the sand and everything will be fine.
Being debased.
You think the U.S. currency is being debased at an unprecedented rate?
Hell,
I mean, since 2019, what is it? 60% of its entire fucking currency was printed into existence.
No, but currency. So currency is not just physical currency, right?
Yes, there's assets. There's other things.
And the value of the U.S. dollar, right, is pegged to its importance as the world currency and as the petrodollar, right? And the value of the U.S. dollar is traded on exchanges, right? FX exchanges. So we know the value of the U.S. dollar. Right.
Okay. You have to understand that I make a living basically borrowing banks' money, buying assets, and arbitraging the difference and paying it back with cheaper debt. I don't add much value to society. I just use banks' money to make money while fucking people go to work. Right? That shouldn't be a thing. That sickens me every fucking day.
I mean, I hate to say it, it's probably not easy, but possibly.
It's easier than you would think.
Jobs.
You just need assets that have inflationary exposure, right? And access to liquidity. Those are the two fucking parts of that recipe.
No, what I'm just trying to say is, I'm sure it's probably easy in that regard. What I meant is maybe look into changing a job. That may not be as easy as I'm saying, but if you
no. From a career perspective, I'm doing fantastic. Like it sickens me that I'm able to attain such heights of wealth since 2019. Like, you have to understand that pre-2019, I was maybe like I had 50, 60 grand in the bank. At this point, I'm almost nearing like 15 million at this point because of all the liquidity that was fucking printed over COVID. I understand how the system works.
the liquidity that was
That wasn't
printed
my
over
point.
over COVID, right? So like, okay, so like there was money pumped into the system, right, with the COVID packages, right? It wasn't unprecedented money. The bailout in 2008 was much bigger. The money pumped into the system led to some inflation, right? But like the most economists that I respect
In
indicate that
terms of
the inflation was actually driven mostly by price gouging at the corporate level. So like
See, you're
maybe
talking
20%
about the
of the inflation.
average consumer inflation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about asset inflation. You know, the real fucking tangible value that you can hold in society, not the shit that you spend every day, that they own all the corporations and they sell you the products and they fucking regulate the prices. No, I'm talking about the shit that goes up when banks give
Wait.
people like
What do
me
you think an
real good
asset
access
is?
to liquidity and what we do with that.
What do you think an
Right?
asset is? Only a tangible asset?
So an asset that has inflationary exposure is what I'm talking about.
Right. Okay. So like an asset that has inflationary exposure. So like the US dollar, right? If you were to buy US dollars in an FX exchange, right? That would have inflationary exposure.
No, fiat currency doesn't. Land has an inflationary exposure. Houses have inflationary exposure. Real tangible physical
Yes, so you are
goods.
talking about
Look at
tangible assets. Like you're not talking about things like purchasing an equity or purchasing a bond, right? Purchasing debt or purchasing, you know what I mean? Like you're not
no,
talking about those as
no,
assets, right? So, but those
no.
are
That
assets.
has an
First of all,
inflationary pressure. Yes, on society. It doesn't give you inflationary exposure necessarily.
like
Because the asset, like the money that's printed
what do
into
you think is
existence.
inflating? What do you think is inflating? The price of the
Uh,
asset?
yes.
The like, or do you think like the currency is inflating, right? Relative to the price of the asset.
The currency is inflating relative to the price of the asset. Like
So the
the
asset, so like okay, so like assets like something like real estate, right? Or like land as you put it, right? Those assets like will go up or go down depending on like the zoning of the region, how affluent the rest of the community is, right? Things like
yes,
that.
there are many
How nice
different
the building
factors
is.
that are going to go into the overall calculation of it, the how much
Right.
the asset's
Okay.
going to cost in the end.
Right.
You're
But
right,
you're not talking about
but
that.
I would argue that like if you look at certain aspects of society, right, and then you look at who got access to near 0% liquidity, right, and where that money actually went, because it didn't go everywhere in society, right?
Wait.
You know,
Near 0% interest,
okay,
right?
why are supercars fucking investments, man?
What?
Why is a supercar an investment?
A supercar?
Yes.
What's a supercar?
Car that flies.
Like a Bugatti or something, right?
Why is that an investment? It's not. It depreciates the minute you take it off the lot. It depreciates by almost half.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I started my life out as a heavy duty mechanic, being a big gearhead, buying classic cars and shit, and holding on to them. And every single one of them have all gone up in value. Everything that I've bought, even something as simple as a used vehicle at this point after COVID.
That
Look at the
is
price of
not
used
a
vehicles.
counter to what he said. Slow your roll.
Okay.
He said about taking a new car off the lot. It does depreciate. Classic cars.
An average new car,
Shut
yes.
up until I'm done. Classic cars have value because after a certain amount of time, they start to go up. They start to have value because of their age. But that's not something they have when they first roll off the dock, now is it? So you are talking about two separate things.
Can I address that? I was talking
No,
about
I'm still
supercars.
talking, and when I'm done talking, then you can talk. That's how conversations work. Now slow your roll. Now you may speak.
Okay. So when you buy a supercar and there's only like an allotment of certain amounts of, they're only going to make 300 of these Ferraris or whatever, and you get onto that list and you buy it, right? The second you drive it off the lot, you can sell it for another $200,000 or more what it's worth. I got a Ford Bronco that I just bought for 50 fucking K, and because the amount of fucking inflationary exposure and the amount of fucking demand for this goddamn thing, you can't get one. It's 2 years on back order. I can drive it off the lot fucking today. I drove it off the lot and I'm fucking sitting on it. Gonna sell it for another 15 fucking grand when I put 15,000 kilometers on it. So it's not necessarily true every single time that you drive a vehicle off the lot that it's fucking worth less. And especially in the average car market, yes, but supercars, just like watches, just like other things that fucking are have this inflationary, because what you have to understand is people on my level, there is a lot of money out there, man. There's not a lot of Ferraris, there's not a lot of Bugattis, there's not a lot of land. Those are the shit that we invest in with our fucking money ends up going up because we're competing against each other for it. We're not competing against fucking brokies for fucking a fucking F-150, right? So I just don't understand how driving a supercar off the lot makes it worth less. It never happens that way.
What was the topic? I mean, it does technically, because I mean, it's not because the value goes down. It's because retailers have an upcharge. They give you an upcharge for profit of the transportation and stuff. Whereas when you're selling it, you don't get the same upcharge, and so the price drops because retailers just sell it for more because they're stupid. That's why you lose a 20% when you drive it off the lot, because there's a 20% extra charge from retailers because they're assholes.
You're talking about regular vehicles, though. I'm talking strictly about supercars.
I'm talking about supercars too. Supercars have the same price because of the shipping and handling of the manufacturers and the retailers.
Okay, I'm sorry, TJ, but this is all just a little bit wacky for me. So like, yes, like it is the case that like if you have something that's in such short supply, right? Like if you have 12 of something, right?
Yeah.
Then it might not be subject to the same pressures of supply and demand that like a more elastic good would be subject to, right? So like that's fine. But you're just talking about things that like there's limited supply and a lot of demand. Like that's just,
okay, maybe we have to ask the question of why is there a lot of demand? Why is there such an unprecedented access to liquidity that's creating such a fucking large demand?
There isn't an unprecedented access to liquidity. Right.
Okay, when 0%,
interest rates
you have to look
are
in
higher now
2019, dude.
than
How many
they've been.
single-family homes were bought up by fucking investment funds? At 0% interest,
Dude,
that money
interest
they
rates are
borrow.
higher now than they've been in 30 years.
Low supply also creates high demand.
What's the topic?
It's a multi-factored equation, right?
Component.
Yeah. Before we get back to God, I just want the answer my question, which was, do you like when you go to bed at night? Do you sleep well?
I mean, I sleep real. The thing is, I do a lot of good with my money, right? I feed a lot of people, so I do sleep very good. But the fact that the mechanisms that do exist that allow me to do this, people that fucking are on another level than much higher up than I am on this, are really moving how society fucking operates, especially in the United States when you can purchase political influence, right? So it comes full circle to how you guys live your lives, and that fucking hurts me. So it's like
one more question, and then I swear we gotta bring it back to religion. When you mean help people, do you mean like grandma, or do you mean like dozens of
every
grandma?
single one of my employees makes more than 6 figures? I take a pay cut in my company to fucking make sure everyone makes good money. So I have my company that made me a lot because I started out as a heavy duty mechanic, right? I bought a service truck. I bought a bunch of service trucks. I hired guys. I made a lot of money in the oil field, and then I started investing my money, right? I started making a lot of money when I invested my money.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Is it possible we could let Penguin back up?
Yeah, but anyways, yeah, we should get back to religion. I do like the money topic because it's definitely one that I'm passionate about.
I'm gonna take off. It's fun.
You have my sympathies.
It's a pleasure to do this stuff with you guys as always. Have a great week.
See you.
It's fun having you on.
Likewise.
And I'll probably do this for like 10 or 15 more minutes ish, and then I gotta go too.
Yep, it's 2:00. I'm gonna get ready for my date. Peace out.